Chapter 1097. 16th Princess? Is it Shaoqing? Lu Ming's heart skipped a beat, and his eyes were suddenly filled with cold, killing intent. Listening to the conversation just now, Xian Yinqing was in the 9 Nether Devil domain, and Xie Jin had sent people to kill him. Damn it! At this moment, Lu Ming's killing intent was extremely strong, but in his heart he felt relieved. At least, Xian Yinqing was fine and alive. I really don't know what Father is thinking. She's a different species, a bitch born from a lowly servant. Father actually didn't kill her directly or suppress her in the 9 Underworld Demon Domain, but only imprisoned her in the 9 Underworld Demon Domain and let her fight with the demons. She's really let off easy. Xie Zhen's face was gloomy and his voice was cold. 8th Prince, what should we do next? One of them asked. That bitch hates me to the bone. If I let her live, I will never be able to rest easy. Xie Zhen said coldly. 8th Prince, in my opinion, you don't have to worry too much. His Majesty didn't kill her most likely because of their father-daughter relationship. But 16th Princess is a different species, and she is a taboo of our Saint Emperor clan. Even if His Majesty doesn't kill her, he won't let her out of the 9 Underworld Demon Domain. She will most likely spend her life in the 9 Underworld Demon Domain. Someone below said, even so, that bitch's talent is too high. As long as she's alive, I won't be able to rest easy. Xie Jin said with a gloomy face, 8th Prince, should we continue to send people? Let's talk about it later. In less than 2 months, it will be the 1 million year national sacrificial ceremony. During this period, Father will not continue to cultivate in seclusion. He is very concerned about the big and small matters. It's not a good time to take action. After the ceremony, we will send experts into the 9 Underworld Demon Domain and kill her in one fell swoop. Xie Zhen's eyes were gloomy. Creak! Lu Ming clenched his fists tightly, and he almost lost control of his killing intent. Who is it? But only a little bit was leaked, and it was sensed by an expert. Whoosh! Lu Ming's figure flickered, and he left the place. In the blink of an eye, he appeared 100 miles away and returned to the dormitory. He really wanted to slap Xie Jin to death, but he knew that now was not the right time. He still had to find a way to find the entrance to the 9 underworlds and save Xian Yinqing. If he killed Xie Jin now, he would definitely alert the enemy. Right now, he could only let Xie Jin live for a while longer. However, Lu Ming swore that he would kill Xie Jin sooner or later. In the following days, Lu Ming would take some time to wander around the 9 underworlds, trying his best to gather information about the 9 underworlds. Unfortunately, he got nothing. It seemed that very few people knew about the 9 underworlds. Lu Ming speculated that the demon realm of the 9 serenities was probably a realm, and the entrance to it was probably somewhere in the imperial palace. As for Lu Ming, other than going out to inquire about things, he would refine the spirit-refining pills and comprehend concepts. The soul-refining pill couldn't directly improve Lu Ming's cultivation, but it could make his spiritual spirit more and more condensed, and his spiritual sense more and more powerful. The more powerful his spiritual spirit was, the more helpful it would be for his future cultivation. 3 days later, while Lu Ming was cultivating, Shifang came again. Lu Ming walked out of his room, looked at Shifang indifferently and said, "What's wrong? You want to get beaten again?" Humph! Shifang's face turned ugly. He coldly snorted and said, "I'm here to inform you that there's a mission. The 8th Prince wants to go hunting in the Bestial Mountain. We need to go together. Let's go." Okay. Lu Ming smiled and walked out in big strides. Shifang looked at Lu Ming's back, and the corner of his mouth revealed a trace of a cold smile. The Imperial Dragon Guards gathered and followed Xie Jin to the Bestial Mountain. The Bestial Mountain was a boundless mountain range where countless fierce beasts lived. It was a hunting ground for the Xie family's disciples to train their cultivation. The Xie family's disciples would often come to the Bestial Mountain to hunt. In fact, they would enter the bestial mountain and fight with fierce beasts. Outside the bestial mountain, there was a huge military camp with living quarters and guards. Shurfang, you will lead the Imperial Dragon Guards and follow me into the mountain. But you don't need to protect me. You guys will hunt separately and see who can kill more fierce beasts. What do you think? Looking at the bestial mountain, Xie Zhen was in high spirits. Eighth Prince, how can we be compared to you? Shurfang revealed a flattering smile. Don't worry, there are also experts in the Imperial Dragon Guards. Try your best to compete with the half-prince. Those who perform well will be rewarded. Xie Zhen smiled. Okay, I'll bring them along. Shurfang bowed again and again. Then let's go. Xie Zhen waved his hand and flew towards the bestial mountain. Shurfang and the others also flew towards the bestial mountain. Could it be that they want to kill me in the bestial mountain? Lu Ming thought in his heart. He guessed that Shurfang's elder brother might attack him in the bestial mountain. Lu Ming's mouth curved into a cold smile. If the other party wanted to die, he wouldn't mind sending him on his way. After flying into the bestial mountain, the group dispersed. Lu Ming was bored as he flew towards the depths of the bestial mountain. The level of the beasts in the periphery of Beast Cry Mountain was very low. There were some king-level and spirit sea-level beasts. As long as Lu Ming glared at them, these beasts would disappear without a trace. After flying for half an hour, no one made a move. Still not making a move? Lu Ming muttered. He sat cross-legged on a huge rock and waited. Even after 2 hours, no one made a move against him. Seems like I guessed wrong. They won't make a move here. Lu Ming's heart skipped a beat. He was a little surprised. Forget it. I guess Xie Zhen's hunt is about to end. I'll just kill a few beasts to deal with it. Lu Ming's figure flashed and soared into the sky. Caw, caw. After a while, cries could be heard as a flock of silver eagles flew past. The moment they saw Lu Ming, over 10 of them charged towards Lu Ming. It's you guys! Lu Ming flicked his finger and long spears condensed out, shooting towards the silver eagles. Puff, puff! 5 of the silver eagles were pierced by the spear light. The remaining eagles were frightened as they cried out and fled. Lu Ming didn't give chase. He swept the 5 eagles up with his true essence and flew back to the army camp. These 5 eagles were equivalent to the 8th level of spirit embryo realm, which was more or less enough. In the army camp, Xie Zhen and the rest had already returned. On the ground of the army camp, there were beasts of all shapes and sizes. 8th Prince is truly powerful to actually be able to hunt down 3 fierce beasts at the 8th level of spirit embryo realm and 3 fierce beasts at the 7th level of spirit embryo realm in just a few hours. 8th Prince is indeed a genius. This little one is impressed. Shurfang stood in front of Xie Zhen and started to flatter him. This is nothing. As long as you guys cultivate properly, you can do it too. Xie Zhen said modestly. However, the complacency on his face couldn't be concealed. His cultivation was at the 6th level of spirit embryo realm. To be able to hunt down 3 fierce beasts at the 8th level of spirit embryo realm and 3 at the 7th level of spirit embryo realm in less than 3 hours in the vast Beast Cry Mountain was already considered a pretty good achievement. And Chapter 1098. With a casual throw, he threw the 5 huge eagles onto the ground, causing the ground to tremble slightly. These are silver eagles. All 5 of them are silver eagles, so powerful. Furthermore, all 5 of them are silver eagles at the 8th level of spirit embryo realm. Deputy Flag Ming's abilities are actually so strong. To be able to hunt 5 silver eagles at the 8th level of spirit embryo realm in less than 3 hours, truly astonishing. The moment Lu Ming returned, it caused a wave of exclamations as the Emperor Dragon Guards started discussing spiritedly. Even though Lu Ming had only hunted 5 demonic beasts, they were all at the 8th level of spirit embryo realm. In terms of value, he had already surpassed Xie Zhen. This caused Xie Zhen's face to turn slightly gloomy. Besides Xie Zhen, Shifeng's big brother gave a cold smile. Deputy Flag Shifeng, who is this? Xiejin asked. Eighth Prince. This is the new Deputy Flag. His name is Ming Lu, and his cultivation is at the 7th level of Spirit Embryo Realm. Shifeng replied. Oh, so it's the new Deputy Flag. Xiejin glanced at Lu Ming. When he saw that Lu Ming merely cupped his fists at him casually without any hint of respect, he felt even more displeased. Xiejin walked towards Lu Ming in large strides and said, Deputy Flag Ming's battle power is astonishing. This prince admires you. Deputy Flag Ming, this prince is itching for a fight. How about you spar with this prince? Spar? The corner of Lu Ming's mouth raised slightly. That's right, spar with me. Use your full strength and don't hold back. Don't worry. You won't be able to hurt this prince. Bang! As Xiejin spoke, he slowly walked forward, and his body gave off an intense golden glow as his aura flourished. He had awakened the bloodline of the 5th level of God grade, and his battle power was very strong. Normal martial artists at the 7th level of Spirit Embryo Realm weren't his match. Therefore, he was filled with confidence. At the side, the others scattered far away. Shifeng and his big brother looked at each other in the eyes and sneered. Make your move. Boom. Xiejin threw a punch towards Lu Ming. The golden fist aura whistled through heaven and earth as it attacked Lu Ming. A long spear condensed in Lu Ming's hand. Ming Lu came from Black Spear sect and used a long spear. Whoosh! The long spear trembled. The tip of the spear trembled, stirring up the wind and clouds as it pierced towards Xiejin's fist. Bang! Xiejin's fist light was penetrated by the long spear and collapsed. Xiejin's gaze sharpened as a trace of killing intent flashed across his eyes. Boom! Boom! Following that, the golden light on Xiejin's body grew even brighter as he punched out unceasingly. Boundless golden light surged and enveloped Lu Ming. Lu Ming's long spear trembled, and spear flowers bloomed in the air. Bang! Bang! Intense collisions rang out, and the fist radiance and spear radiance disappeared without a trace. Back then in Nine Dragon City, Xiejin's cultivation was at the peak of the 7th level of the Spirit Sea realm. Now that 3 years had passed and Xiejin was in the ancient Saint dynasty, he definitely had plenty of resources. His cultivation had risen to the 6th level of the Spirit Embryo realm, and his battle prowess was indeed not bad. Ordinary martial artists at the 8th level of the Spirit Embryo realm weren't his match and would be killed by him. However, he was facing Lu Ming, and Lu Ming was already doing his best to suppress his own power. After dozens of moves, he still couldn't take down Lu Ming. Xiejin's eyes flashed with killing intent. Above his head, a tall, burly man in golden armor appeared. He was 100 meters tall and held a long spear in his hand. 5 golden chakras shone brightly, making him look like a god. Xiejin turned into a ray of light and entered the body of the burly man in golden armor. Kill! The burly man in golden armor shouted as the golden long spear in his hand emitted a dazzling radiance and pierced towards Lu Ming. The huge long spear brought along a terrifying whistling sound, and its power was extremely shocking. What a strong killing intent. He wants to kill me. Lu Ming's eyes flashed with a trace of cold light. If it wasn't for the fact that he was worried about alerting the enemy, Lu Ming would have killed Xiejin right away. Boom! Lu Ming took a step forward and soared into the sky. The spear radiance condensed in his hand grew rapidly, becoming 100 meters long and 10 meters wide. He swept the spear towards the burly man in golden armor. Boom! The 2 long spears collided, and the entire barracks shook. The burly man in golden armor's body shook violently as he was blasted back repeatedly by Lu Ming's spear. Swoosh! Lu Ming charged over directly, and the huge long spear smashed down fiercely with the force of splitting a mountain. Boom! The long spear smashed heavily onto the burly man in golden armor, causing his body to shake violently and almost fall to the ground. After that, Lu Ming's spear changed into a horizontal sweep, and it smashed heavily onto the burly man in golden armor. The burly man in golden armor let out a shrill cry as his body directly collapsed and transformed back into Xie Zhen's appearance. He spat out a mouthful of blood as he retreated. How audacious! You dare injure the 8th prince? You're courting death. Bang! Shi Fang's older brother, Shi Zhang, took a step forward and appeared before Lu Ming. His aura at the first level of the domain enlightened spirit god realm erupted with a bang, and a terrifying pressure suffused the sky above the barracks. The expressions of many people changed drastically because the pressure of the domain enlightened spirit god realm was truly too strong, causing many people to tremble and break out in cold sweat. However, Lu Ming was like a cool breeze and didn't feel anything at all. He glanced casually at Shi Zhang and said, "The 8th prince asked me to use my full strength just now, and I was merely obeying the 8th prince's orders. You still dare to quibble? The 8th prince's body is extremely precious, and he's extremely respected. You actually dared to injure him. You've offended your superior and have no sense of seniority. You simply deserve death for your crimes. I'll cripple you right now and lock you in prison to properly reflect on your actions." Shi Zheng's gaze was gloomy while a trace of a complacent, cold smile hung on the corners of his mouth. The nearby Shi Fang was even more complacent, and he glared fiercely at Lu Ming. On the other hand, Xie Zhen's expression was gloomy and unsightly, yet he didn't stop Shi Zhang. Just as Shi Zhang had said, Lu Ming had actually dared to injure him, and he simply deserved death for his crimes. Ha ha ha! Truly laughable. The 8th prince personally gave the order for me to attack with my full strength, and I was merely obeying the order and exerting my full strength, causing me to accidentally injure the 8th prince. Yet you made a move against me because of this. Do you think the 8th prince's orders are nonsense? Would anyone listen to him in the future? Lu Ming roared with laughter and wasn't afraid in the slightest. He finally understood now that all of this was a trap set up by Shi Zhang. Shi Zhang understood Xie Zhen very well and knew that Xie Zhen was narrow-minded. If Lu Ming were to compete with Xie Zhen and win, or even injure Xie Zhen, then only death would await Lu Ming. That was why today's matter happened. Even if Lu Ming's kills didn't surpass Xie Zhen's, Shi Zhang would still find a way to let the 8th prince and Lu Ming exchange pointers. But today, everything went smoother than Shi Zhang had imagined. Lu Ming's kills actually surpassed Xie Zhen's, which made Xie Zhen unhappy with Lu Ming. He directly challenged Lu Ming to a battle, and there was no better result than this. Before the battle began, Xie Zhen already had the intention to kill Lu Ming. If Lu Ming's battle strength wasn't enough and he wasn't Xie Zhen's opponent, then Xie Zhen would most likely kill him on the spot. But if Lu Ming's cultivation was stronger than Xie Zhen's, then Xie Zhen's killing intent would definitely be heavier, and Lu Ming would also be on the road to death. Therefore, whether Lu Ming won or lost, his death was certain. Bold, presumptuous, who do you think you are? You are insulting the 8th prince, and you deserve 9 exterminations. Shi Fang shouted from the side, and the killing intent in Xie Zhen's eyes was even thicker. A lowly ant actually dared to insult him. He deserved to die 10,000 times. Boom! Chapter 1099. Looks like I can't use this identity. Lu Ming's eyes turned cold. He planned to kill Shi Zhang, Shi Fang, and Xie Zhen together. Right at that moment, haha, 8th brother, what's the matter? Why is it so lively? A loud laugh sounded. Then a roar came from the sky. It seemed like a huge army was running towards them. There were about a few hundred cavalrymen, and each of them was riding a fiery red warhorse. These warhorses were covered in fiery red scales, and there were 2 dragon horns on their heads. Flames danced all over their bodies, and they looked extraordinarily mighty. It was a dragon horse. Legend had it that it had the bloodline of a true dragon. The powerful dragon horse was not weaker than a WIRM. The few hundred cavalrymen were all riding on dragon horses. The leader was a young man. He was tall and slender. He wore fiery red armor and fiery boots. His hair was loose, and his eyes were like lightning. His aura was powerful. "10th Prince," many people exclaimed. Rumble. The dragon horse stepped into the air and appeared in the sky above the camp. "Greetings, 10th Prince." Shi Zheng, Shi Fang, and the others hurriedly knelt in front of the 10th Prince. Their eyes were filled with reverence. "10th brother, why are you here?" Xie Zhen's face was a little ugly. There was a trace of jealousy and reverence in the depths of his eyes as he looked at the young man in front of him. The 10th Prince, Xie Yan, was a peerless genius. He was one of the best amongst all the children of the current sacred emperor, and he was a second-rate genius whose name shook the central continent. His cultivation was formidable, and he'd even stepped foot into the domain spirit god realm now. His status in the ancient saint dynasty wasn't something that Xie Zhen could compare to at all. In the imperial family, Xie Yan was second only to Xian Yinjuan. "8th brother, you can hunt, but I can't? What are you doing? It seems like you want to attack one of your subordinates. What's going on? Tell me." The 10th Prince, Xie Yan, pointed at one of the imperial dragon guards and ordered. His tone was arrogant and indisputable. The imperial dragon guard did not dare to be negligent, nor did he dare to hide anything. He recounted everything that had happened. "Haha, so that's how it is. 8th brother, you are getting worse and worse. You can't even defeat a deputy flag of the 7th level of spirit embryo realm. But it's fine if you can't defeat him. But you said you would kill him after you lost. If this matter were to spread out, wouldn't our Saint Emperor clan become a joke?" Xie Yan said indifferently. "Haha, 10th brother, you've misunderstood. I didn't mean to kill him. Just now bodyguard Shi Zheng saw that I was injured and was worried. That's why he stood in front of me. Everything is a misunderstanding." Xie Zhen's expression fluctuated for a while before he revealed an ugly smile. "Really? So it was all a misunderstanding. However, this Vice Flag Commander's combat strength is not bad. He is only 1 level higher than 8th brother, but he can easily crush 8th brother. He is a talent." Xie Yan smiled. Xie Zhen clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles cracked. He was simply furious. Taking a deep breath, he calmed himself down and revealed a smile. "That's right. This Vice Flag Commander Ming Lu's combat strength is indeed not bad. Therefore, I plan to transfer him to the law enforcement army. Coincidentally, the million-year national sacrifice is about to begin. When that time comes, the sacred city will definitely be in chaos. The law enforcement army is in need of manpower." When he said that, Shi Fang and Shi Zheng's eyes lit up and revealed a cold smile. As for the others, they looked at Lu Ming with pity. Lu Ming's heart moved. What was the meaning of these gazes? "Haha, he is 8th brother's man. You can arrange him however you want. Let's go." Xie Yan smiled and led the 400 cavalrymen towards Beast Cry Mountain. After Xie Yan left, Xie Zhen's expression turned gloomy. He swept a cold glance at Lu Ming and said, "Vice Flag Commander Ming, go back and wait. The order will be given soon. You shall go to the law enforcement army and be a commander. With your combat strength, it's about time." When Xie Zhen said that, the expressions of the others became even weirder. They looked at Lu Ming with even more pity. "And you will be transferred to the law enforcement army with him." Then Xie Zhen pointed at Sun Lin. Plop! Sun Lin's expression changed drastically. Then he knelt down with a thud and kowtowed as he screamed, "No, 8th Prince, I beg you. No, don't transfer me to the law enforcement army. I only live with him. I don't know him." "Humph, you want to disobey this prince's order?" Xie Zhen's eyes turned cold. Sun Lin's face turned pale, and he stood there in a daze. "Let's go." Xie Zhen soared into the air and returned to his residence. The others quickly followed. "Sai Minglu, I'm going to die because of you." Sun Lin let out a long sigh with a bitter expression. "What's going on? Why don't you want to join the law enforcement army?" The law enforcement army, from the name. It should have a lot of power. Lu Ming asked curiously. Many sects had their own law enforcement hall. The law enforcement hall had a lot of power. They enforced the law on behalf of the sect and were respected by everyone. Why did Sun Lin seem to be afraid of joining the law enforcement army? When the others heard that Xie Zhen wanted to transfer Lu Ming to the law enforcement army, they all looked at him with pity. Sai, you might not know this, but the law enforcement army does have a lot of power. However, that power is useless now. Sun Lin sighed and continued to explain. The law enforcement army is the law enforcement organization of the ancient Saint dynasty. They are responsible for enforcing the law in the holy city and maintaining the security of the holy city. No matter who you are, no matter which force you are from, the law enforcement army will be dispatched to enforce the law if you commit a crime in the holy city. Lu Ming nodded his head. Isn't that a lot of power? If it was 30,000 years ago when the ancient Saint dynasty ruled the world, everyone would be afraid of the law enforcement army. They had great power, and anyone who committed a crime would be suppressed or even killed on the spot. At that time, everyone wanted to join the law enforcement army. As long as you joined the law enforcement army, everyone would be afraid of you. But now the ancient Saint dynasty is weak and the emperors are divided. Each of them is powerful, and the position of the law enforcement army is very awkward. For example, if the disciples of the major forces commit a crime, should the law enforcement army take action or not? If they don't take action, the law enforcement army represents the reputation of the ancient Saint dynasty. In that case, the imperial family might blame them because it would be a disgrace to the imperial family. However, if they take action, the experts of the major forces would put pressure on the imperial family. Under the pressure, the imperial family would usually hand over the law enforcement army to appease the other party's anger. In that case, who would be willing to go to the law enforcement army? Sun Lin explained. Lu Ming had a sudden realization. He finally understood. The main reason was that the ancient Saint dynasty was weak and they did not dare to offend the major forces. If that was the case, the power of the law enforcement army would be rendered useless. If they didn't do anything, they would be throwing the face of the ancient Saint dynasty. If they did something, the people from the major factions would be able to pressure the law enforcement army. The law enforcement army would then become the scapegoat. No matter what they did, they would be jumping into a fire pit. It was no wonder that when the others heard that Lu Ming would be transferred to the law enforcement army, they all reacted that way. Sai, once he is transferred to the law enforcement army, it's all over. Moreover, the 1,000,000-year national ceremony is coming. When the time comes, the holy city will gather, and all the major forces of the divine wilderness continent will gather. It will definitely be chaotic. What should the law enforcement army do? Only death awaits. Chapter 1100. 3 days later, the transfer order was officially issued. Lu Ming was transferred to the enforcer army as the commander, leading a team of 100 people. Sun Lin would follow him. Lu Ming took the transfer order and set off with Sun Lin. Lu Ming didn't mind. To him, the enforcer army was better as it gave him more freedom. He could walk around the holy city as he pleased. That way, he would be able to gather more information. Sun Lin, on the other hand, was listless. He had a gloomy expression on his face. Soon, the two of them arrived at the enforcer army's encampment, the enforcer hall. There were many enforcer halls in the holy city. A team of 100 people was led by a commander. They were stationed in the enforcer hall and were responsible for enforcing the law in a certain area of the holy city. Lu Ming was the commander of this team of enforcers. He was mainly in charge of an area in the northeast of the holy city. When Lu Ming walked in, he only saw a few figures sitting listlessly in the enforcer hall. He didn't see anyone else. After seeing Lu Ming's group, those people only glanced at Lu Ming casually and continued to sit listlessly. Lu Ming frowned and said, "Just a few of you, where are the others?" One of them looked at Lu Ming and said, "Who are you? You dare to barge into the enforcer hall without permission. Do you know that this is a serious crime? I'm the new commander. Let me ask you, where are the others?" Lu Ming took out a token and shouted coldly, "The new commander?" Those people's eyes suddenly lit up, flickering with greed and burning flames. They seemed to be suddenly energized and stood up one after another. Then one of them shouted, "A new commander is here. Brothers, come out. We have money to spend again." His voice spread far and wide. Just as his voice fell, the sound of breaking wind rang out. Figures rushed out from various rooms in the enforcer hall. There were at least 80 to 90 people. As soon as these people appeared, they stared at Lu Ming and Sun Lin with burning eyes. It was as if they were burly men who had been thirsty for decades and saw a peerlessly enchanting beauty. "Ha! Another unlucky bastard has arrived, and it's even a commander. You've come at the right time. Take out all your origin stones and treasures, and share them with us brothers." A burly man who looked like a gorilla stepped out. His muscles bulged as he stared at Lu Ming with a ferocious gaze. "Hee, you're actually just a martial arts practitioner at the 7th level of Spirit Embryo Realm, and you're transferred here to be a commander. I really don't know which big shot you've offended. However, no matter who you've offended, since you're here, hand over the origin stones and treasures." A gray-haired old man in his 60s sneered. "Ha! Once we get the origin stones, let's go eat and drink to our heart's content, shall we?" "That's for sure. Motherfucker, I haven't enjoyed it for a long time." The others were also in a hubbub, talking one after another, looking at Lu Ming as if they were looking at a piece of fat meat. Sun Lin's face was pale. Lu Ming was dumbfounded. This was the law enforcement army? This was the law enforcement hall. Lu Ming almost thought that he had come to a bandit's lair. These people actually wanted to rob him. After careful observation, this was undoubtedly the law enforcement hall. "You guys want to rob me?" Lu Ming's face revealed an indescribable smile. "If you want to interpret it that way, that's fine too. Hurry up, otherwise my fist is going to itch." The burly man who looked like a gorilla stared at Lu Ming unkindly. The smile on Lu Ming's face became even wider. Sweeping his gaze, he said, "Since that's the case, all right, I'll rob you now. Hand over all your storage rings." "What? What did you say?" Once Lu Ming's words came out, the entire place quietened down. Everyone looked at Lu Ming, dumbfounded. After a while, everyone burst into laughter. "Haha, did I hear wrongly? This fellow at the 7th level of Spirit Embryo Realm actually wants to rob us? Who does he think he is? Does he really think he's a commander? Isn't he the same as us? An unlucky fellow who offended someone he shouldn't have offended. What a joke!" Bang! The burly man with the gorilla took a step forward, and a violent aura burst out from his body. With a wave of his hand, he grabbed at Lu Ming. This person's cultivation was at the consummate level of Spirit Embryo Realm. Among this group of people, he was at the peak. "Let's see what abilities you have." The burly man with the gorilla revealed a ferocious expression. Lu Ming's gaze turned cold. He stretched out a hand and grabbed the wrist of the burly man with lightning speed. His vital essence burst forth as he grabbed the burly man and flung him violently. Boom! The burly man with the gorilla was like a sandbag as he crashed heavily onto the ground, causing the entire law enforcement hall to tremble violently. If it wasn't for the powerful formation inscribed in the law enforcement hall, it would probably have exploded. The burly man with the gorilla screamed miserably as he crashed onto the ground. His cultivation and vital essence were incomparably weak in the hands of Lu Ming. They were completely scattered by Lu Ming. At this moment, his entire body seemed to have fallen apart. He didn't have any strength left as he laid on the ground, howling in grief. Everyone suddenly became silent as they looked at Lu Ming in shock. The burly man with the cultivation of the consummate level of Spirit Embryo Realm was actually beaten to the point where he couldn't resist at all. How was this possible? "Brothers, let's attack together. This person's battle prowess is profound, so he must have a lot of benefits on him. Let's attack." The white-haired elder shouted loudly. 80 to 90 law enforcers also shouted and rushed towards Lu Ming like a swarm of bees. Bang! Lu Ming took a step forward and rushed over like a flowing light. He slapped out, "Pat! Pat!" In the law enforcement hall. Rapid slapping sounds could be heard, as well as howls and screams of agony. which were all mixed together. In less than a minute, 80 to 90 law enforcers were lying all over the law enforcement hall. They were lying on the ground and howling in grief. One side of their faces was bulging up, making them look incomparably miserable. Sun Lin looked at this scene dumbfoundedly. His mouth was opened so wide that he could swallow a duck egg. Was Lu Ming's cultivation at the 7th level of spirit embryo realm? Wasn't his battle prowess a little too strong? In this team of law enforcers, there were 5 to 6 people with consummate spirit embryos. The rest of them were experts, at least at the 4th level of spirit embryo realm and above. However, in less than a minute, they were all beaten down by Lu Ming. They were as weak as babies. This was too terrifying. He felt that his head couldn't quite turn around. "You dare to attack me? You're courting death." Lu Ming shouted coldly. Now, Lu Ming had the appearance of a burly man with a full beard. When he glared, he looked quite imposing. Grabbing the air with his palm, his vital essence burst forth. The storage rings on the fingers of these law enforcers were all sucked over by Lu Ming. If they wanted to rob him, they had to be prepared to be robbed by him. First, Lu Ming picked up the storage ring of the burly chimpanzee and scanned it with his spiritual consciousness. He was dumbfounded. This, "Aren't you a little too poor?" Lu Ming stared at the burly chimpanzee and was completely speechless. In the storage ring of the burly chimpanzee, other than a few spirit crystals, there was almost nothing else. Origin stones, no. Good spirit weapons, no. Not to mention any precious medicinal pills or materials. It was completely empty. There was nothing at all. This was a storage ring with a consummate spirit embryo after all. How could it be so poor? Next, Lu Ming looked at the storage rings of other people. Many of them were even poorer than the burly chimpanzee. Chapter 1101. Lu Ming scanned dozens of storage rings and found that they were all similar. The contents inside were miserable and didn't look like the storage rings of martial artists above the 4th level of spirit embryo realm at all. Looking at Lu Ming's dumbfounded expression, the chimpanzee and the others were embarrassed. With a wave of his hand, all the storage rings flew back to the chimpanzee and the others. "Get up, don't play dead." Lu Ming looked around and said coldly. Lu Ming didn't hit them hard just now. He only scattered their vital essence temporarily, so it wasn't a big deal. After all, Lu Ming was the commander of these people. He couldn't kill them as soon as he arrived. The chimpanzee and the others got up from the ground one by one. "Commander, your battle power is profound. I'm really impressed." As soon as he got up, the chimpanzee showed a simple and honest smile, which was completely different from the ferocious look just now. Yes, Commander, your cultivation is unparalleled. You got rid of us in just a few moves. It's the first time I've seen something like this in all my years." The white-haired elder also flattered. "Commander is invincible. Commander is mighty." The other members of the law enforcement army also flattered. Lu Ming's eyelids kept twitching. He was quite speechless. What kind of people were these? They wanted to rob him just now, but now they changed their attitude so quickly. "Why are you so poor? You don't even have a piece of origin stone in your storage rings?" Lu Ming asked curiously. "Sai, we are the law enforcement army. It's so hard. Commander, it's like this." Everyone started to explain to Lu Ming. After listening, Lu Ming fell into deep thought. The life of the law enforcement army was even worse than what Sun Lin said. The law enforcement army had to enforce the law in the sacred city and protect the reputation of the ancient Saint dynasty. However, the ancient Saint dynasty had declined. Although it was still an overlord force, or even the strongest one, it was just an overlord force. It no longer had the power to dominate the world. Therefore, when it did things, it had to be scrupulous and had to build a good relationship with other forces. Therefore, the law enforcement army didn't dare to arrest or punish the people of the big forces when they committed crimes. However, they had to protect the reputation of the royal family. What could they do? Therefore, most of the time the law enforcement army had to pay out of their own pockets to give gifts to the disciples of the big forces and those who had committed crimes. They would ask them to do a good deed and apologize in public. In this way, the law enforcement army would naturally protect the reputation of the royal family. The criminals would also admit their mistakes, and the matter would be resolved. However, they had to fork out their own money. Over time, it would be strange if the law enforcement army was not poor. It was no wonder that they wanted to rob Lu Ming as soon as they saw that he was new. Lu Ming was speechless. The law enforcement army was too cowardly. The culprit was fine, but they had to give the culprit benefits. This was simply unheard of. The law enforcement army is supposed to enforce the law under the heavens and represent the ancient sage dynasty in enforcing the law. However, it's a pity that the ancient sage dynasty no longer has the power to do so. In fact, the law enforcement army could have been removed long ago. However, the imperial family has kept it for the sake of their dignity. The white-haired old man sighed. Lu Ming finally knew why Xie Jin transferred him to the law enforcement army and made him a commander. The million-year national ceremony was getting closer and closer. People from all the big forces would gather. It was an eventful time. If something went wrong, Lu Ming would offend someone and he wouldn't even know how he died. Moreover, the responsibility of a commander would naturally be greater. Xie Zhen, if you want to play, let's play. Lu Ming's lips curled into a smile. He waved his hand, and a storage ring flew towards the chimpanzee man. There are 10,000 origin stones here. Use it to buy some good wine and delicacies. I'll treat everyone to a good meal. If there's more, each of you can buy a spiritual weapon. These people were simply too poor, to the point that they had even sold their own spirit weapons. 10,000 origin stones? The chimpanzee man took the ring and was stunned at first. Then he was overjoyed and said, "Thank you, Commander." The others were also overjoyed. They thanked Lu Ming and then went to buy good wine, delicacies, and spiritual weapons. The wine and delicacies that martial artists ate were different from those of ordinary people. They were all from powerful, fierce beasts and demon beasts. The wine was also spiritual wine, which was very expensive. Half a day later, the chimpanzee man and others bought a lot of good wine and delicacies. The 80 to 90 people were divided into several tables and ate to their heart's content. They hadn't eaten and drank to their heart's content for a long time. At the moment, they were quite grateful to Lu Ming. Everyone ate and drank while chatting. Through chatting, Lu Ming learned that these people had offended big shots and were transferred here. They had families and friends in the sacred city. They couldn't escape, so they could only suffer in the law enforcement army. Everyone ate and drank for a few hours. Not good. Someone destroyed a shop on North Street and killed the shopkeeper. He's still there now. Suddenly, a law enforcement army soldier rushed in to report the news. What? Who did it? Trouble. Something happened again. The chimpanzee man and others' faces changed drastically. They were usually most afraid of accidents because once something happened, it would be easy to deal with some unknown people. However, if it was a big shot, it would be difficult. It's the young master of the Huang family, Huang Ko. The messenger said, "What? The Huang family is a family with many spiritual immortals. What should we do?" The chimpanzee man and others' faces changed drastically. They couldn't offend any force with a spiritual immortal. Otherwise, the spiritual immortals of the other party could directly find their superiors and put pressure on them. Let's go and have a look. Lu Ming picked up a glass of wine, drank it all, and strode out. You, we'll go together. The chimpanzee man picked a dozen people and followed Lu Ming out of the law enforcement hall. Their law enforcement hall was in the northeast of the sacred city. It was very close to North Street. They arrived in a short while. On the way, Lu Ming also knew what was going on. Huang Ku, the young master of the Huang family, took a fancy to a treasure in a shop, but there was no origin stone. He said that he owed it first and wanted to take the treasure first. Those who knew Huang Ku knew that he had never paid back anything he owed. The shopkeeper naturally didn't agree, so Huang Ku killed the shopkeeper and destroyed the shop. He even wanted to kill the shopkeeper's family. As soon as he arrived, he heard an arrogant voice. "Damn it, I gave you face, but you didn't take it. I said that you owed it first. It's not like you won't pay it back. Why don't you agree? You're courting death. Who can you blame?" An arrogant voice sounded. "Get out of the way. If you don't get out of the way, I'll kill you too." A deep voice sounded. It must have been Huang Ke's servant. "Get out of the way, get out of the way. The law enforcement army is on duty. Get out of the way." The chimpanzee man roared. The crowd made way, and Lu Ming strode over. A white-haired old man was lying on the ground, no longer breathing. Chapter 11:02. That youth was Huang Ke. Behind Huang Ke, there was even a burly man following behind her. At this moment, Huang Ke also saw Lu Ming and the rest. However, not only was he not afraid, he even sneered. "What's going on?" Lu Ming walked over and asked with a frown. "So, it's people from the law enforcement army. This person offended me and was killed by me. You guys can collect his corpse." Huang Ke had his hands behind his back as he casually glanced at Lu Ming and said indifferently, "Killed by you? This person was running a shop in the sacred city and should be protected by the law enforcement army. Why did you kill him? Follow us to the law enforcement hall and give us an explanation." Lu Ming said coldly, "What did you say? You want to capture me and bring me to the law enforcement hall?" Huang Ke seemed to have heard a very funny joke and almost laughed out loud. He looked at Lu Ming in disbelief. The others at the side were the same. The law enforcement hall dared to capture Huang Ke? Huang family was considered quite a power in the sacred city. Now that the law enforcement army existed in name only, would they really dare to capture Huang Ke? Nonsense! Tai Xing, capture him! Lu Ming shouted loudly. Tai Xing was the name of the burly chimpanzee. The burly chimpanzee revealed a difficult expression. "Commander, this Huang Ke is not to be offended." Tai Xing whispered in Lu Ming's ear. "Humph, if you guys don't make a move, I'll do it myself." Lu Ming's gaze turned cold as he stepped forward. "You dare?" Huang Ke shouted loudly. "Why wouldn't I dare?" Lu Ming sneered. "A mere law enforcement army. You're courting death. Kill him." Huang Ke waved his hand, and the burly man behind him stepped forward. A violent aura burst forth as the aura of the 8th level of spirit embryo realm burst forth. "Die!" The burly man shouted angrily with cold killing intent. He unsheathed his battle knife and slashed towards Lu Ming's neck. "Want to kill me? Die!" Lu Ming took a step forward and struck out with his palm. Space rumbled, and the terrifying power instantly broke through all of the burly man's defenses. A palm slapped the burly man's chest, and a large hole directly appeared in his chest. He screamed, and with a look of disbelief, his life was cut off. Even at the moment of his death, he still could not believe that the trash of the law enforcement army had become so domineering. You dare!" Huang Ke was so scared that her face turned pale. She trembled all over and looked at Lu Ming in disbelief. "If you want to kill me, you have to be killed by me. Since you asked him to kill me, I'll cripple you first." Lu Ming's eyes flashed with killing intent. "No, don't." Huang Ke was extremely terrified. Whoosh! Lu Ming flicked his finger, and a spear light shot out, crippling Huang Ke's cultivation. "Ah! You crippled my cultivation. I want you to die a horrible death, a horrible death!" Huang Ke screamed miserably. At the side, the others were incomparably shocked. This law enforcement army was completely different from before. They were actually so ruthless and decisive. However, there were also many people who secretly clapped their hands and cheered. This Huang Ke had relied on her family's power to commit all kinds of evil. She finally got her retribution. However, this law enforcement army was going to be miserable later. The Huang family would not let this matter rest. Behind Lu Ming, Tai Xing and the others widened their eyes, not knowing what to do. Although they also felt very good doing this. Their entire bodies felt comfortable. But now they felt comfortable, But what about the consequences? If Huang Ku was crippled, the Huang family would probably go crazy. Lu Ming sucked Huang Ku and the burly man's storage rings over and handed them to the two women at the side, one old and one young, obviously the shopkeeper's family. The two of them cried bitterly with a helpless face. "Take these two storage rings and leave the sacred city. Go live somewhere else." Lu Ming handed over the storage rings to the two and said, "Thank you, sir." The two of them thanked him repeatedly and then quickly left the city. "Tai Xing, bring this trash back to the law enforcement hall." Lu Ming ordered, then turned around and walked towards the law enforcement hall. Tai Xing and the others looked at each other. In the end, they gritted their teeth and carried Huang Ke back to the law enforcement hall. Along the way, Huang Ke's crying attracted many people's attention. There's a good show to watch. The Huang family will definitely go crazy and kill their way to the law enforcement hall. They probably won't kill the law enforcement army directly, but they will put pressure on the law enforcement army and then kill their way to the law enforcement hall. Let's go and take a look. Let's go and take a look. Along the way, a large group of people followed behind Lu Ming and the others to the law enforcement hall. Not long after, Lu Ming and the others returned to the law enforcement hall. When the remaining law enforcement army saw this scene and heard what had happened, they were all pale with fright. "It's over. How are we going to deal with the other party's experts when they come knocking on our door? Forget it, we can't hide. Let's go all out. But I feel pretty good in my heart." "That's true. Haha." The other members of the law enforcement hall discussed softly. Lu Ming's face was calm. He crossed his arms and closed his eyes to rest, waiting quietly. The sky around the law enforcement hall was filled with people. Some are waiting quietly while some are gloating. Time passed slowly. 2 hours later. "The Huang family is here," someone shouted. Whoosh! At this moment, Lu Ming opened his eyes and looked at the sky. There were a total of 3 people in the sky. The 2 old men were dressed like Huang Ku. They should be the experts of the Huang family. The other middle-aged man was actually wearing the uniform of the law enforcement hall. "It's the commander-in-chief." Tai Xing's face changed and whispered in Lu Ming's ear. The commander-in-chief he was referring to was the commander-in-chief of the law enforcement army. He was in charge of all the existing law enforcement army in the Holy City. The commander-in-chief of the law enforcement army's face was as black as a pot. His gaze fell on Lu Ming, and he scolded, "Ming Lu, why aren't you releasing young Master Huang Ku?" The commander-in-chief of the law enforcement army was extremely displeased. Especially when he looked at Lu Ming, he was even more displeased. How could Lu Ming not be aware of the current situation of the law enforcement army? He had accidentally apologized to them and even dared to kill the guards of the Huang family and cripple Huang Ku's cultivation. It would be strange if the Huang family didn't fly into a rage. Look, their domain enlightened spirit god expert had directly come looking for him and pressured him. Release him? Haha, Commander-in-Chief, this person killed the shopkeeper of a store on the street. That shopkeeper had to be protected by the ancient saint dynasty to do business in the Holy City. Otherwise, who would dare to do business in the Holy City in the future? I'm acting impartially. Why should I release him? Lu Ming sneered as he replied. The other members of the law enforcement hall behind him broke out in cold sweat for Lu Ming. The commander-in-chief of the law enforcement army was a domain enlightened spirit god expert. Lu Ming actually dared to speak to a domain enlightened spirit god expert like that? Sure enough, Lu Ming's words caused the commander-in-chief of the law enforcement hall's expression to become even more gloomy. However, he was unable to find the words to refute Lu Ming. Because Lu Ming was right. Lu Ming was carrying out the duties of the law enforcement hall. As the commander-in-chief of the law enforcement army, how could he refute Lu Ming? Haha, Commander-in-Chief Chin, looks like your subordinate doesn't listen to you at all. Since it's like that, then allow me to personally cripple this person's cultivation and bring him back to the Huang family to be dealt with. Chapter 1103. First Level of Spirit God. Lu Ming's lips curled into a cold smile. The elder from Huang family was at the first level of spirit god, and the other elder beside him had an even weaker cultivation. He was only at the perfected spirit embryo. However, this person had a powerful aura that was far from ordinary perfected spirit embryos. Lu Ming guessed that this person had awakened his god-level bloodline, but hadn't broken through to the spirit god realm. He was considered an old monster, and his battle power was much stronger than ordinary perfected spirit embryos. Bang! Lu Ming stepped on Huang Ke's face, making him scream like a pig being slaughtered. "How dare you say you want to cripple me?" the commander of the law enforcement army in the disciplinary hall. "You are simply disgraceful and deserve to die." Lu Ming shouted and glared at him. With his face full of beard, he looked righteous. He exerted force with his feet and rubbed Huang Ke's face against the ground. "Ah, old ancestor, save me." Huang Ke screamed miserably. "How dare you, evil creature! You are courting death." The elder with the perfected spirit embryo shouted and took a step forward with a violent aura. He formed a huge palm and pressed down on Lu Ming. "Not good. It's an old monster with a perfected spirit embryo." The expression of Taixing and the rest changed drastically. Taixing also had a perfected spirit embryo, but his battle power was far inferior to that of a perfected spirit embryo who had awakened a god-level bloodline. However, Lu Ming's expression was still calm. He clenched his hand into a claw and clawed upwards. With a poof, the old man's palm collapsed instantly. Lu Ming's claw, which was condensed by his vital essence, continued to grab the old man at an incredible speed. In an instant, the old man was caught in his hand. "Break!" The elder's expression changed drastically, and his god-level bloodline appeared. He executed bloodline fusion and unleashed a violent attack, wanting to break apart Lu Ming's vital essence claw. However, it was a pity that it didn't budge. "Come down!" Lu Ming shouted softly. He pulled his claws downwards and directly pulled the old man's body down from the air, smashing him onto the ground ruthlessly. Boom! The earth quaked, and the old man screamed miserably. His protective genuine had been shattered by Lu Ming. His bones crackled and popped, and it was unknown how many of them had been broken. He lay on the ground, screaming miserably like a dying dog. The surrounding onlookers, including the other members of the law enforcement hall, were all dumbfounded. They looked at this scene in disbelief. The onlookers, in particular, swallowed their saliva like crazy. This disciplinary hall commander was too awesome. Firstly, his battle prowess had exceeded everyone's expectations. An old monster with a perfect spirit embryo was pulled down from the sky in one move and smashed into the ground half dead. Such battle prowess could be said to be astonishing. Secondly, this commander was too audacious. Not only had he crippled Huang Ke, he'd even bashed a senior of the Huang clan to the point he was on the verge of death. Next, he would definitely have to face the rage of a domain enlightened spirit god. "Bastard, you're courting death." Sure enough, the spiritual god expert from the Huang clan was furious. He let out a loud roar as a terrifying aura erupted from him. A pressure that was as deep as the ocean suffused the entire area. Many people's expressions changed drastically as they retreated madly. The pressure formed by a spiritual god expert's attack was too strong and absolutely terrifying. "Die!" The spiritual god of the Huang clan shouted and pointed his finger. Everywhere his finger passed, yellow rays of light burst forth. The space distorted like ripples of water and was finally torn apart. Whoosh! A terrifying finger force was aimed at the center of Lu Ming's eyebrows. This awesome commander is finished. Such a thought flashed through everyone's mind. Boom! Just when such a thought flashed through everyone's mind, Lu Ming blasted a fist towards the sky. A fist aura soared into the sky and collided with the finger force. With a loud boom, the finger force and the fist aura disappeared at the same time. What? He blocked the attack of the domain enlightened spirit god? Waves of cries of disbelief came from the surroundings. Lu Ming's battle prowess had once again exceeded everyone's expectations. He had actually blocked the attack of the domain enlightened spirit god. The eyes of the commander of the law enforcement hall flickered, and he was incomparably astonished. According to what he knew, Ming Lu had been transferred to the law enforcement army because he had offended the Eighth Prince. According to the information he had received, this person's battle prowess was only slightly stronger than the Eighth Prince. When he had sparred with the Eighth Prince, he had recklessly injured the Eighth Prince. Therefore, no matter how strong his battle prowess was, it was still limited. He had never expected that he could actually block the attack of the domain enlightened spirit god. It seems that this person has been hiding his strength, the commander of the law enforcement army thought to himself. A murderous intent flashed through Lu Ming's eyes. His gaze was like two resplendent spear auras that pierced towards the Huang clan's elder. He said indifferently, "It seems that you want to be like him." The him that Lu Ming was talking about was the elder with a perfected spirit embryo. At this moment, the Huang clan's spiritual god's heart couldn't help but tighten. At this moment, he actually felt a terrifying pressure from Lu Ming. It was as if he was facing a terrifying, ferocious beast that could tear him into pieces once it went berserk. This kind of feeling made him panic in his heart. "What do you want?" The Huang clan's spiritual god asked with an unsightly expression. "Apologize and admit your mistake in front of everyone," Lu Ming said. "Don't even think about it. Don't go overboard. If you let him go now, I won't pursue the matter." The Huang clan's spiritual god's face turned ugly. However, by saying so, he was already taking a step back. Lu Ming sneered and said, "This person killed the shopkeeper of the holy city for no reason. I am the commander of the law enforcement army, and I am here to enforce the law on behalf of the Saint Emperor. Your Huang clan is so audacious that you actually dared to kill your way into the law enforcement hall. Are you looking down on the ancient Saint dynasty and the imperial Xie clan? Are you trying to overturn the heavens? And you, as the commander of the law enforcement hall, it's fine if you don't enforce the law impartially, but you actually help the other party to bully the law enforcement hall. It seems that you also don't put the imperial family in your eyes." Lu Ming's every word struck the heart of the Huang clan's spiritual god and the commander of the law enforcement hall. Their expressions changed drastically and became abnormally ugly. Lu Ming was pulling the wool over their eyes and putting a big label on them. However, this label was too heavy for them to bear. Today, there were so many people here. If Lu Ming's words reached the ears of the imperial family and even the Saint Emperor, they would definitely have to bear the consequences. Although the law enforcement hall existed in name only now and no one really cared about it, it was still the law enforcement hall in essence. Before the law enforcement army was withdrawn, it had the same meaning as it did 30,000 years ago. It had the power to enforce the law. In fact, other law enforcement hall people could also put a label on others because once this matter was blown out of proportion, the imperial family would definitely intervene. However, the premise was that they had to have strength. For example, if Lu Ming was not strong enough, he would have been slapped to death by the Huang clan's expert. There would be no chance to put a label on him. However, it was different now. Since Lu Ming had already spoken out and put a label on them, if they continued to act, it would really be like what Lu Ming said. They didn't put the Imperial Xie clan in their eyes. After that, the Imperial Xie clan would definitely take action. Otherwise, where would their face go? Damn it. The Huang clan's spiritual god and the commander of the law enforcement army gritted their teeth. But there was nothing they could do. "Okay, this is my Huang clan's fault. I apologize. In the future, I will definitely warn the Huang clan's disciples to follow the rules of the law enforcement army." The Huang clan's spiritual god was helpless. In the end, he could only apologize. Then, he looked at Huang Ku and asked her to apologize. Chapter 1104. Scram! Lu Ming picked up Huang Ku and threw him to the Huang family's spirit god as if he was throwing trash. The Huang family's spirit god's face was very cold. He stretched out his hand and grabbed the elder with a perfect spirit embryo before leaving without looking back. Today, the Huang family had lost all face. The commander of the law enforcement army also snorted and left by stepping into the air. The surrounding onlookers looked at each other in disbelief. They had originally thought that with the Huang family's large-scale attack, the commander would most likely be dead. Who would have thought that even though the Huang family's experts had come, they would return with their faces covered in dirt? As for the commander, he was completely unharmed. This was out of everyone's expectations. This commander of the law enforcement army is really awesome. He's really awesome. He's the most awesome commander of the law enforcement army I've ever seen. Everyone was discussing spiritedly. The people of the law enforcement army were also tongue-tied. They didn't expect the final result to be like this. However, it felt great. The eyes of the 80 to 90 people of the law enforcement army lit up. They felt extremely comfortable. As for Lu Ming, they were full of admiration. "Commander is mighty," Tai Xing roared. "All right, cut the crap and get to work." Lu Ming waved his hand and returned to his room. Everyone dispersed, but the matter of the law enforcement army having a powerful commander spread out like a whirlwind. It gave everyone something to talk about while they were cultivating. Time passed day by day. In the blink of an eye, Lu Ming had been in the law enforcement army for half a month. During this half a month, other than cultivating, Lu Ming was strolling around the sacred city. Of course, he wasn't really strolling around. Instead, he was loitering outside the imperial palace to see if he could find a chance to sneak in. In the end, he gave up helplessly. There were too many terrifying existences in the imperial palace. He had carefully sensed and found that there were countless existences in the imperial palace that could easily kill him. There were even some incomparably terrifying auras that were like the aura of a supreme being. They were definitely supreme beings. Lu Ming had sensed no less than 10 of such auras, and this was what Lu Ming had sensed. If he hadn't sensed anything, then there was definitely something else. Although the ancient holy court had weakened, a starving camel was still bigger than a horse. The ancient holy court was still the most powerful force in the central continent, and its power was unfathomable. This was to be expected as well. If they weren't strong, they would have long been destroyed by the other overlord forces. After all, there were many overlord forces who were eyeing them covetously. In the past half a month, more and more people had gathered in the holy city as the ancient sage dynasty's 1,000,000-year state ceremony was getting closer. However, due to the incident with the Huang family last time, some small forces would not be too presumptuous. In the areas under Lu Ming's jurisdiction, nothing major happened. On this day, a shocking piece of news spread throughout the holy city. The sage emperor intended to choose a husband for one of the princesses during the 1,000,000-year national sacrifice, and he wanted to choose one of the heroes of the younger generation. As soon as this news came out, it was like an earthquake that shook the entire holy city. Countless people were shocked. The current sage emperor had a total of 16 children. Among them, there were 13 princes and only 3 princesses. However, the 13 princes were completely suppressed by the 3 princesses. That was because 2 of the 3 princesses' names shook the world. Their magnificence was unmatched, and they were simply too outstanding. Xian Yinjuan was one of the top 5 youths in the central continent. At the same time, she was also one of the top 5 beauties of the central continent. Her beauty was unparalleled and unparalleled. There was another princess, Xian Yanlin. She was also one of the top 5 beauties of the central continent. However, her martial arts talent was slightly inferior to Xia Nianjuan's. Nevertheless, she was still a second-grade genius and was on par with Sandalwood Fairy and Jing Conling. These 2 princesses were so outstanding that countless people were envious of them. It was said that there was another princess. She was the youngest of all the princes and princesses. She was also peerlessly beautiful. Her appearance and temperament were not at all inferior to the other 2 princesses. Even her martial talent was incomparably shocking. However, not many people had seen her before. That was because that princess was an anomaly in the imperial Xie family. Anomaly was a taboo word in the imperial Xie family. That was because the imperial Xie family was weakened because of an anomaly. Which princess was the sage emperor going to choose a husband for? Everyone was extremely curious. However, no matter which princess it was, many young geniuses from the major factions were tempted. Then the major factions sent people to investigate and verify the authenticity of the news. Lu Ming's heart trembled when he heard the news. Who was the sage emperor going to choose a husband for a princess? Lu Ming was very worried. He was afraid that it was Xian Yinqing. 3 days later, an even more shocking piece of news was released. The current sage emperor personally ordered someone to spread the news. It was true that he was going to choose a husband for a princess. The princess was Xie Nianlin. Moreover, it was going to be a competition between young geniuses on the day of the million-year national sacrificial ceremony. The person who won first place would become Xie Nianlin's husband and would also be able to enter the sage emperor's ancient palace to cultivate. The person who won second and third place would be able to make a request to the sage emperor. The sage emperor would try his best to fulfill the request and would also be able to enter the sage emperor's ancient palace to cultivate. The person who won 4th to 10th place would be able to enter the sage emperor's ancient palace to cultivate. When the news was released, it caused a huge earthquake in the sacred city. Countless people were shocked. At the same time, the news spread to the central continent and even the surrounding territories at the speed of a tornado. Countless young geniuses were shocked. Their eyes lit up. Some of the geniuses were not interested in the person who won first place or being able to marry a princess. Instead, they were interested in a condition from the sage emperor, which was to enter the sage emperor's ancient palace to cultivate. The sage emperor was an emperor. There was no need to mention the value of a condition from him. The sage emperor's ancient palace was a sacred place for cultivation. Legend had it that the ancient dynasty's sage emperors had comprehended the palace. If one could comprehend it, it would be very useful for breaking through to the emperor realm in the future. The ancient dynasty's Xie family had been passed down for millions of years. They had produced many emperors and had never stopped. That was why they had always been strong. Some people said that it had something to do with the sage emperor's ancient palace. This made the geniuses who wanted to become emperors extremely excited. After confirming the news, they all rushed to the sacred city. When Lu Ming heard it, he heaved a sigh of relief because the princess was not Xian Yinqing. However, at the same time, Lu Ming was also very excited. What he was excited about was not Xian Yinlin, nor was it about entering the sage emperor's ancient palace. It was about a condition from the sage emperor. If he could get 2nd or 3rd place, he would be able to ask the sage emperor to let Xian Yinqing go. At the thought of this, Lu Ming decided that he would participate in this competition. This piece of news caused the ancient sacred dynasty to lose its peace. It became the top topic of discussion. People talked about it every day, and it didn't die down for a long time. Many people were secretly guessing why the sage emperor would do this. However, it was not difficult for people with foresight to guess that the imperial Xie family wanted to use this method to increase the strength of the imperial family. The person who could get first place and marry Princess Xie Nianlin would definitely be a genius from an overlord force. This way, through marriage, the imperial family would increase the strength of the imperial family. Chapter 1105. Amidst the hustle and bustle, time passed day by day. The holy city became even more lively and more people came. However, Lu Ming's daily routine remained the same. Apart from cultivating, he would be strolling around the sacred city with his men. This mansion is so strange. It's covered in dust, and there's an inscription formation on the outside to seal it off. In the northeast of the sacred city, Lu Ming brought his men for a stroll and arrived at a huge mansion. The mansion was ancient and majestic, occupying a large area. However, no one was living in it as it was sealed off by a formation. It was rare to see such a mansion in the sacred city? Sir, lower your voice. This mansion is a taboo. Sun Lin said softly with a heavy expression. He seemed to be afraid of it. Taboo? I'm curious. Tell me about it. Lu Ming asked curiously. Sun Lin's face was filled with hesitation as he squeaked. Tell me. Lu Ming's face sank. All right, Commander. I'll tell you through voice transmission. This mansion is the mansion of the Chaotic Sky Divine Emperor, Xiaowan. Sun Lin said to Lu Ming through voice transmission. The Chaotic Sky Divine Emperor, Xiaowan? The Emperor of Chaos Sky who caused the internal strife of the Ancient Saint Dynasty 30,000 years ago and caused the Ancient Saint Dynasty's strength to plummet? Lu Ming was shocked. That's right. It's the mansion of the Chaotic Sky Divine Emperor, Sun Lin said. Oh, Sun Lin, you seem to know a lot about the Chaotic Sky Divine Emperor. Do you know why he betrayed the Imperial Xie family? Lu Ming asked. Lord Commander, I've accidentally read about it in an ancient book. Legend has it that the Chaotic Sky Divine Emperor, Xiaowan, is an anomaly in the Xie family. The Imperial Xie family has a noble bloodline, and the bloodline that they awaken is pure and holy. However, there's a small chance that someone will awaken a bloodline that's completely different from the others. It's an extremely dark bloodline. This kind of person is called an anomaly by the Imperial Xie family and will be looked down upon and mocked. When the Chaotic Sky Divine Emperor was young, he grew up under all kinds of ridicule and humiliation. Therefore, he hated the Imperial Xie family. However, the Chaotic Sky Divine Emperor was terrifyingly talented. The more bloodlines he awakened, the more terrifying his talent became. He was simply unparalleled in the world. Therefore, the Imperial Xie family attached great importance to him and entrusted him with important tasks. Later on, the Chaotic Sky Divine Emperor broke through to the Emperor realm. His combat strength was terrifying, and he was able to suppress the other emperors. At that time, the Chaotic Sky Divine Emperor finally erupted. He led his subordinates and started a rebellion. They fought against the Imperial Xie family. Although the Chaotic Sky Divine Emperor was suppressed in the end, the Ancient Saint Dynasty suffered a great loss in that battle. Countless spirit gods and sovereigns were killed. Even the emperors were killed. Since then, the Ancient Saint Dynasty's strength was greatly weakened. The Ancient Saint Dynasty's strength has reached a new height. Sun Lin told Lu Ming everything that he had read. Lu Ming fell into deep thought. The Chaotic Sky Divine Emperor's experience was similar to Xian Yinqing's. The bloodline that he awakened was called an anomaly by the Imperial Xie family. It's just a bloodline. It's ridiculous that they treated it like that. The Chaotic Sky Divine Emperor, Xiaowan, was extremely talented. If the others did not mock and humiliate him when he was young, why would he rebel when he became stronger? If he didn't rebel, he wouldn't be where he was today. The Ancient Saint Dynasty's Xie family would only become more prosperous and powerful. I heard that the current 16th princess also awakened an anomaly bloodline. Sigh, it's so pitiful. The anomaly bloodline has always been looked down upon by the imperial family. Moreover, after the Chaotic Sky Divine Emperor, the anomaly bloodline ended up in a worse state. Before the Chaotic Sky Divine Emperor appeared, the imperial family would still nurture the anomaly bloodline of the imperial family if they showed great talent, just like the Chaotic Sky Divine Emperor. However, after the Chaotic Sky Divine Emperor appeared, the imperial family suppressed any anomaly bloodline directly. The stronger one's talent was, the more they suppressed them. It's simply a taboo because they are afraid that another anomaly like the Chaotic Sky Divine Emperor will appear. Sun Lin continued. Crack! Lu Ming could not help but clench his fists tightly. No matter what, he had to save Xian Yinqing. No matter how difficult it was, he had to go through it. Then, Lu Ming left without asking any questions. Time passed quickly. Soon, there was only half a month left until the Million-Year State ceremony. After this period of cultivation, Lu Ming's cultivation had also improved and reached the mid-second level of the spirit god realm. It's too slow. It's really too slow to increase my cultivation by absorbing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Lu Ming sighed. However, there was nothing he could do. He didn't have many origin stones with him now. The amount of origin stones needed to increase one's cultivation in the spirit god realm was simply terrifying. However, the water intent of heaven and earth had broken through and reached the fourth level of the initial stage. Now, only the earth intent had not broken through to the fourth level of the initial stage. On this day, Lu Ming had just ended his cultivation and was about to go out for a walk when someone came to report that something had happened. Someone had killed someone on the street and the battle was still ongoing. "Who is it?" Lu Ming asked. "I heard that it's a disciple of the Sky Martial Sword sect." Tai Xing replied with an ugly expression. The Celestial Martial Sword sect was an overlord force. Furthermore, it was an extremely powerful overlord force. What should they do now? They knew that something was going to happen as the various overlord forces gathered in the holy city. What should we do? Of course, we have to do it impartially, Lu Ming said. Impartially? Commander, the other party is the Sky Martial Sword sect. Tai Xing cried out worriedly. So what if it's the Sky Martial Sword sect? Don't forget that this is the holy city and not the Sky Martial Sword sect. All of you follow me. Lu Ming shouted coldly and walked out with large strides. The others had no choice but to follow. They flew in the air and soon arrived at the scene of the incident. It was outside a restaurant. At this moment, the restaurant was surrounded by people. Lu Ming appeared in the air and looked down. On the street, 2 people were lying on the ground with blood flowing everywhere. Their throats were slit by a sword and they were no longer breathing. On the other side of the 2 corpses, the battle was still ongoing. 3 Celestial Martial Sword sect disciples in white robes were currently attacking 3 people. One of them was an old man and the other 2 were young men and women. However, the 3 of them were no match for the 3 Sky Martial Sword sect disciples. The 3 Sky Martial Sword sect disciples were all experts at the 5th level of Spirit Embryo Realm. They were very young and belonged to the younger generation. To have such a cultivation at such a young age, they were clearly the top prodigies of the Sky Martial Sword sect. As for the old man and the young man, the old man's cultivation was at the 7th level of Spirit Embryo Realm. However, the young man and woman's cultivation were only at the 1st or 2nd level of Spirit Embryo Realm. The difference was too great. Although the old man's cultivation was high, the 3 Sky Martial Sword sect disciples were all top prodigies. It was normal for them to fight above their level. They completely suppressed the old man and made him unable to retaliate. "Hee, you guys are courting death. How dare you talk about the Sky Martial Sword sect behind our backs?" One of the Sky Martial Sword sect disciples sneered. "The Sky Martial Sword sect is too overbearing. You don't even allow others to talk?" In the World Academy's St. Manor secret realm, Wu Qingkong and the rest were killed by Lu Shaoqing. This is the truth, and everyone knows it. Are you guys going to kill everyone in the world? Chapter 1106. Lu Ming's eyes flickered. Through the simple conversation between the 2 parties, it wasn't hard to guess what was going on. The young lady and the others must be talking about what happened at the World Academy and the Sacred Mansion, Secret Ground. In the Sacred Mansion, Secret Ground, the 2 strongest sky prides of the previous generation of the Sky Martial Sword sect were killed by Lu Ming. The 2 strongest sky prides of the current generation were also killed by Lu Ming. They only managed to survive because of the life talisman. This matter had already spread far and wide. Lu Shaoqing's name had even shaken the entire Middle Continent. The young lady and the other disciples of the Sky Martial Sword sect must have heard about this matter. Given the tough style of the Sky Martial Sword sect, they naturally took action. "Shut up! How dare you mention this matter again?" Who knows what despicable means Lu Shaoqing used to harm our senior brothers of the Sky Martial Sword sect? How dare you talk nonsense here? You're courting death. Kill! The disciples of the Sky Martial Sword sect bellowed as they attacked even more violently. Stop! The enforcers are here. Lu Ming stepped down from the sky and shouted. The three disciples of the Tianwu Sword sect turned to look at Lu Ming. Their eyes were filled with contempt. This is the Sky Martial Sword sect's business. Unrelated people, scram! One of the disciples of the Sky Martial Sword sect bellowed in an extremely domineering manner. The enforcers were nothing in their eyes. It's that awesome commander of the enforcers. Could it be that he dares to touch the disciples of the Sky Martial Sword sect? Impossible. No matter how awesome he is, he might be able to deal with a small faction like the Huang family. But this is the Sky Martial Sword sect, one of the top overlord factions. Unless he's tired of living, he wouldn't dare to touch the disciples of the Sky Martial Sword sect. That's right. Didn't you see those disciples of the Sky Martial Sword sect ignoring him? At this moment, many people in the crowd recognized Lu Ming. However, no one thought that he would dare to touch the disciples of the Sky Martial Sword sect. A puny enforcers dared to touch the disciples of the Sky Martial Sword sect? Wasn't that just courting death? Kill! The three disciples of Celestial Martial Sword sect ignored Lu Ming, and their attacks became more and more violent. Their sword chi was like rainbows, and the elder of the 7th level of Spirit Embryo Realm was completely at a disadvantage. He couldn't withstand the attacks at all, and his chest was slashed by a sword light. A deep sword wound appeared, and he was almost cleaved into 2 halves. Young miss, young master, leave quickly! That elder roared loudly, risking his life to erupt with power, wishing for that young man and woman to quickly leave. Leave? Today! None of you will be able to leave. How dare you spread rumors about my Celestial Martial Sword faction? All of you deserve death. A disciple of the Celestial Martial Sword sect shouted coldly. With a flash of his body, he bypassed the old man like a beam of sword light and charged towards the young woman. No, that elder roared loudly, but he couldn't even protect himself, so how could he help? The young girl's face was snow white. She was only at the 1st level of Spirit Embryo Realm, while her opponent was at the 5th level. Furthermore, he was a prodigy with strong battle prowess. She couldn't defend against him at all. Die! The disciple of the Celestial Martial Sword sect revealed a malevolent look in his eyes as his sword flashed like lightning, slashing down at the young woman. However, when the sword light was halfway through, it stopped. That was because someone had grabbed onto the disciple's wrist, preventing him from slashing down. The person who had grabbed onto his wrist was naturally Lu Ming. At the crucial moment, Lu Ming appeared in front of the young woman and blocked the disciple's sword. When he saw that it was Lu Ming, the disciple of the Celestial Martial Sword sect had a shocking murderous intent in his eyes. He shouted, "How dare you, a mere enforcer, interfere with my attack? I'll kill you as well." His vital essence burst forth as the sword chi on the disciple's body whistled. His other hand was like a sword, piercing towards Lu Ming's throat. Bam! Lu Ming immediately kicked out, landing a kick on the disciple's stomach. The disciple let out a blood-curdling scream as his body flew dozens of meters away, landing heavily on the ground. You dare to retaliate? The disciple of the Celestial Martial Sword sect cried out in disbelief. Lu Ming actually dared to retaliate? He was a disciple of the Celestial Martial Sword sect. Idiot, Lu Ming said indifferently. This person wanted to kill him earlier. Wasn't it normal for him to retaliate? Could it be that this disciple of the Celestial Martial Sword sect was so superior that no one dared to retaliate when he killed someone? His head must have been kicked by a donkey. At this moment, the other 2 disciples of the Celestial Martial Sword sect stopped their attacks as they looked at Lu Ming in shock. A mere enforcer, an ant, actually dared to hit a disciple of the Celestial Martial Sword sect? They were still in a daze. The onlookers were also dumbfounded. It took a while for someone to react. Oh my God, this awesome commander is really awesome. He even dares to hit a disciple of the Celestial Martial Sword Sect. Yeah, this is really beyond my expectations. He's way too gutsy. Gutsy but brainless. How is he going to deal with the aftermath? Lu Ming's actions caused a commotion as everyone was shocked. Previously, no one thought that Lu Ming would dare to make a move. But the truth was beyond their expectations. Kid, you're courting death. At this moment, the other two disciples of the Celestial Martial Sword Sect finally reacted. One of them hollered as he became one with his sword. Turning into a sharp sword light, he charged towards Lu Ming, wanting to kill Lu Ming with a single slash. Bam! But what welcomed him was another kick from Lu Ming. This kick was the same as the previous one. It landed on the disciple's stomach. It was fast, accurate, and ruthless. The Celestial Martial Sword Sect disciple cried out in pain as he flew far away. He landed beside the previous disciple and fell flat on his face. Both of their postures were exactly the same. The crowd gasped. Lu Ming was truly audacious. If Lu Ming accidentally hit the disciple of the Celestial Martial Sword Sect because he was in a hurry to save someone, then this time it was completely intentional. He wasn't afraid of the disciples of the Celestial Martial Sword Sect at all. Amongst the crowd, the enforcers who came with Lu Ming were all sweating profusely. They sighed in their hearts. They had messed up big time. The remaining disciple of the Celestial Martial Sword Sect was shocked. Lu Ming's combat strength was too horrifying. With just a casual move, he had taken care of a fellow disciple who was about the same level as him. This made him not dare to make a move. Kid, how dare you hit the genius of our Celestial Martial Sword Sect? You're dead. Not only you, but the forces behind you and your family are all dead. They're all going to be wiped out. Just you wait. A lowly enforcer. Just you wait. The remaining disciple of the Celestial Martial Sword Sect shouted malevolently before turning around to leave. Did I allow you to leave? Lu Ming said indifferently. The disciple froze. Looking at Lu Ming, he asked, "What do you mean by that?" He was about to leave on his own accord, and Lu Ming still wanted to pursue the matter? Nonsense. You want to leave after killing someone in my territory? Who do you think I am? What do you think the enforcers are? Lu Ming shouted and stepped forward. You, don't come over. I'm telling you, you're dead. The remaining disciple of the Celestial Martial Sword Sect shouted. But when he saw Lu Ming approaching, he was so frightened that he couldn't even speak properly. Phew! Chapter 1107. This kick was as fast as lightning. By the time the other party came to his senses, Lu Ming had already kicked him in the stomach. He screamed and flew out, landing in a row with the previous two people. He was sprawled on the ground, looking like a dog eating feces. Ah, bastard, you're dead meat. The elders of my Celestial Martial Sword faction, as well as senior brothers Wu Qingkong and Wu Tsang, are all here. They're not far from here. The news will spread out soon. A disciple of Tianwu Sword Sect yelled and threatened Lu Ming. Bam! Lu Ming strode over and stomped on the disciple's face, causing his face to rub against the ground. Wu Qingkong, Wu Tsang? They're just two pieces of trash who were killed by Lu Shaoqing in the Sacred Mansion's secret realm. If it weren't for the life talisman, they would have died long ago. I'll wait here for these two pieces of trash. If Lu Shaoqing can kill them, so can I. Lu Ming lowered his head and looked down at the three disciples of Tianwu Sword Sect. His cold voice echoed throughout the area. Everyone was stunned. This awesome commander is too awesome. He's going to wait here for Wu Qingkong and Wu Tsang? Is he going to learn from Lu Shaoqing and kill supreme talents? Lu Shaoqing was a peerless supreme talent who was comparable to the 5 giants. How could a mere law enforcer compare to him? However, they couldn't help but admire Lu Ming's courage. Lu Ming was going to step on the disciple's face and wait here. The other 2 disciples of the Tianwu Sword Sect lay on the ground, not daring to say a word. They were afraid that they would be trampled on. However, in their hearts, they hated Lu Ming to the core. They could not wait to tear him into pieces. Tai Shing and the others were drenched in cold sweat. Tai Shing walked quietly to Lu Ming's side and said, "Commander, isn't this too much? What if the experts of Tianwu Sword Sect arrive? What's there to be afraid of? We're from the Law Enforcement Hall. We're here to enforce the law on behalf of the Saint Emperor. What's there to be afraid of?" Lu Ming said casually. This, Tai Shing and the others were speechless. They could only bite the bullet and wait with Lu Ming. News of what happened here spread like a whirlwind. What? Was there such a thing? There's actually such a powerful commander. Let's go take a look. When many people heard the news, they didn't believe it at first. Then they were extremely curious and wanted to go and take a look. Many disciples and geniuses from the overlord factions were astonished when they heard the news. Over the years, the royal clan's power had been declining steadily. The law enforcement army was practically useless. The geniuses and disciples of the transcendent powers could do whatever they wanted in the Saint City. How would the law enforcement army dare to control them? They would rather curry favor with them. Now, there was actually someone who dared to beat up the Sky Martial Sword faction's genius. This piqued the curiosity of many, and they all rushed over to watch. In 8th Prince Xie Zhen's residence, Xie Zhen was drinking tea in the courtyard when Shi Zheng rushed in. "Guard, Shi, why are you in such a hurry?" Xie Zhen asked. "8th Prince, it's about Ming Lu." Shi Zhengdao, "Oh, is that blind guy dead yet? Even if he didn't die, he wouldn't be able to survive, right? Humph! How dare you injure this prince? What a blind dog!" Xie Zhen drank a mouthful of tea and said slowly, "He didn't die. That guy is really audacious. Huang, who from the Huang family, killed someone some time ago. He actually crippled Huang. 'Cause cultivation." Shi Zheng replied, Crippled Huang 'cause cultivation? Didn't the Huang family come and kill Ming Lu?" Xie Zhen asked curiously. "Of course they did. A spiritual god expert and an old monster with a perfected spirit embryo went. They even called the commander of the law enforcement army." Shi Zheng said, "Oh, if that's the case, then Ming Lu isn't dead yet?" Xie Zhen was curious. In his opinion, Ming Lu should have been slapped to death by the spiritual god of the Huang family. No, that Ming Lu's combat strength is amazing. He actually blocked the attack of the spiritual god and even used the carelessness of the Saint Emperor. Shi Zheng gave a brief account of what had happened the last time. Damn it, this Ming Lu actually has such a cultivation and even used the name of the royal clan. Humph, he's lucky to have escaped this calamity. After listening, Xie Zhen's face turned ugly. He was very unhappy. Then his expression changed and he said, "You said you rushed here because of Ming Lu. What happened to him?" This time he's dead for sure. He actually beat up a disciple of the Sky Martial Sword Sect." Shi Zheng told him about how Lu Ming beat up a disciple of the Sky Martial Sword Sect and how he was waiting for the experts of the Sky Martial Sword Sect. "This Ming Lu is really audacious. Haha, let's see how he's going to die this time. Let's go. We can't miss such a good show. Let's go and take a look." Xie Zhen stood up excitedly and rushed over with Shi Zheng. In the northeast of the Saint City, in front of the restaurant, Lu Ming stepped on the face of a disciple of the Sky Martial Sword Sect and waited there quietly. In the sky, more and more people came and filled the sky. "Wu Tsang is here!" A loud shout shook the entire place. In one direction, many people opened up a path. In the sky over there, 2 figures were walking in the air. One of them was the 2nd grade Sky Pride of the Sky Martial Sword Sect, Wu Tsang. Behind Wu Tsang was Shi Fang. This stunned Lu Ming for a moment. Then he realized that Shi Fang must have reported to Wu Tsang. In fact, that was the case. When Shi Fang heard that Lu Ming had beaten up a disciple of the Sky Martial Sword Sect, he knew that his chance had come. He had always wanted to befriend a Sky Pride like Wu Tsang, but he never had the chance. Now the chance had come. Without hesitation, he rushed to Wu Tsang's residence and passed the news to him. As expected, Wu Tsang was enraged and rushed over. Wu Tsang's footsteps were slow. Every step he took caused the sky to buzz and tremble. It seemed like it couldn't withstand Wu Tsang's anger. Wu Tsang's eyes were filled with killing intent. He said in a cold voice, "Trash of the law enforcement hall, how dare you beat up a disciple of the Sky Martial Sword sect? Good, very good. Just you? Where's Wu Qingkong? I heard that you and your fellow disciples were beaten up badly by Lu Shaoqing. Today, I'll learn from Lu Shaoqing and beat all of you up. Unfortunately, it's just you." Lu Ming glanced at Wu Tsang casually and said indifferently. The crowd was stunned. Isn't this commander a little too arrogant? Wu Tsang alone isn't enough. He wants to beat up Wu Qingkong and Wu Tsang like Lu Shaoqing? Who does he think he is? Wu Tsang was a second-grade sky pride. He was famous in the world and had reached the spiritual god realm. A sky pride like him couldn't be compared to an ordinary spiritual god. Lu Ming was able to block a blow from the Huang clan's spiritual god. Does he really think he can compete with such a sky pride? He's too naive. Many people shook their heads. They thought that this awesome commander was dead meat today. Tai Xing and the others had ugly expressions. They didn't dare to say a word. They just stood behind Lu Ming with gritted teeth. They had no choice. In such a situation, they could only hold on. "Haha, let's see how you're going to beat me up then." Wu Tsang laughed in anger and took a step forward. Boom! Heaven and earth shook violently. Sword chi surged into the sky and stirred up the wind and clouds. A terrifying light was emitted from Wu Tsang's body. Every ray of light was like a sword chi. Chapter 1108. Those who had never seen a second-grade genius in action were shocked. Is this the strength of a second-grade genius? His aura was too terrifying. Many people retreated frantically, afraid that they would be affected by Wu Tsang's sword. When such a genius attacked, his aura alone could kill an expert of the same level. This commander is dead for sure. Seeing Wu Tsang's aura, many people sighed. Wu Tsang was so strong. What could Lu Ming use to block him? Die. Wu Tsang shouted coldly. His palm was like a sword, bursting with light, forming a dazzling sword light that slashed towards Lu Ming. As the sword light slashed through, even the space was torn apart, revealing a dark and terrifying space crack. This is not good. Dodge! Behind Lu Ming, Tai Xing and the rest were terrified. In the face of such a powerful sword, they felt that it was impossible to resist. Only death awaited them. They screamed and wanted to retreat, but they realized that their bodies were shrouded by a terrifying sword aura, making it hard for them to move. It's over, it's over. We're finally killed by this unreliable commander. Tai Xing and the rest had this thought flashing through their minds. But at this moment, they saw a long spear condensing in Lu Ming's hand. As the long spear shook, it buzzed and even the space trembled. At this moment, Tai Xing and the rest realized that the sword aura that shrouded them had disappeared and they had regained their freedom. Whoosh! Then they saw Lu Ming holding the long spear and sweeping it out. This spear was like a long spear sweeping across the water. Wherever the long spear passed, ripples would appear in the space, and these ripples would all gather on the long spear. Bang! The long spear and the sword light collided. There was only a slight sound, and Wu Tsang's sword light was destroyed. He blocked it? Tai Xing and the rest were stunned. The surrounding onlookers were also stunned. This badass commander could actually block Wu Tsang's move? Since when was a commander of the law enforcement army so powerful? A bunch of questions flashed through the minds of the crowd. Wu Tsang was also stunned. Obviously, he didn't expect that a lowly commander of the law enforcement army could block his attack. Although he didn't use his full strength in that attack, it still made him feel embarrassed. Who was he? He was a famous second-class genius in the central continent, second only to the 5 young giants. How? could he not take down a commander of the law enforcement army with one move? This made him burst out with even stronger killing intent, a blazing killing intent. Good, very good. So you do have some ability. But today, your fate has already been decided. Wu Tsang coldly shouted as the sword qi around his body became even hotter. His Jian Yuan continued to pour out before finally transforming into a sword qi that was several times more powerful than before, slashing towards Lu Ming. However, Lu Ming still casually swept out with a spear, dispersing Wu Tsang's sword energy, turning it into nothingness. Show me what you've got, or else it's not enough. Lu Ming cast a sidelong glance at Wu Tsang. Damn it! Wu Tsang shouted angrily as he unsheathed his sword. A shocking sword light shone as if it was going to split the heaven and earth apart. Kill! Wu Tsang held the battle sword in his hand. His power was incomparably terrifying. When the battle sword slashed out, the space shattered. Heavens, he's too strong. Wu Tsang is angry. This is too terrifying. Retreat, retreat. Many people cried out as they frantically retreated again. Whoosh! Lu Ming held the spear in one hand as the long spear in his hand slashed out violently. It became 1,000 meters long and swept out in a barbaric manner. With a bang, Wu Tsang's sword qi shattered once again. However, this time, Lu Ming did not stop. The terrifying giant spear continued to press towards Wu Tsang. Impossible! Wu Tsang shouted in disbelief. He had already used a divine-level martial skill in the previous move, but it was still defeated by Lu Ming's spear. How was this possible? He could not believe it. What was most unbearable for him was that Lu Ming's spear swept towards him, giving him a strong sense of crisis. How could a mere enforcer, an ant-like thing, have such a powerful expert? Erupt, erupt! Wu Tsang roared in his heart as he unleashed his divine-level bloodline. He executed the bloodline fusion and turned it into a battle sword with shocking sword qi. Suppress! Lu Ming stepped into the air. The long spear contained the power of the suppressing hell skill. The spear changed its momentum and smashed towards Wu Tsang. Clang! The long spear clashed with the battle sword that Wu Tsang had transformed into. The attack from the battle sword was instantly defeated. The battle sword trembled violently before exploding with a bang. The battle sword exploded, revealing Wu Tsang's original body. His face was pale as he spat out large mouthfuls of blood. His eyes were filled with disbelief. In the surroundings, everyone looked at the scene in disbelief. Wu Tsang was defeated. Wu Tsang was actually defeated by Lu Ming's spear. How was this possible? What was going on? Was this still the commander of the Enforcer army? How could he be so powerful? Those who thought that Lu Ming was dead for sure almost bit off their tongues and stared with their eyes wide open. It was simply too unbelievable. As for Shi Fang, he thought that he was dreaming. Wasn't Ming Lu only at the 7th level of Spirit Embryo Realm? Wasn't he just a disciple of Black Spear Sect? How could he be so strong? His body started to tremble, slightly due to disbelief. As for Tai Xing and the rest, they were completely petrified. The 3 disciples of Celestial Martial Sword Sect were also petrified as they stared blankly at the sky. How weak! I thought a second-class prodigy of Celestial Martial Sword Sect would be strong. Lu Ming curled his lips, his face full of disdain. Wu Tsang was infuriated. He was so angry that he wanted to roar at the sky. In the past, he was terrifyingly talented and powerful. In Celestial Martial Sword Sect, only Wu Chengkong could suppress him. Even in the Battle of Destiny, he didn't lose too badly. But recently, he was killed by Lu Shaoqing in the secret realm of the Saint Mansion. If it weren't for the life talisman, he probably wouldn't have survived. Now he was defeated by a mere commander of the Enforcer army. This was a great humiliation. From now on, his name, Wu Tsang, would become a laughing stock. How could he not be angry and resentful? If he knew that Lu Shaoqing and the commander of the Enforcer army in front of him were the same person, how would he feel? Bastard, just you wait. You're dead for sure. Wu Tsang roared and retreated quickly, planning to retreat first. Since you're here, where do you want to go? Why don't you lie down with your junior brothers? Lu Ming stepped out. His body was like a flash of light. He dashed to Wu Tsang in a few moves. How dare you? Wu Tsang roared. Lu Ming wanted to suppress him and make him lie there with the other disciples of Celestial Martial Sword Sect? How dare he? He was the second-class prodigy of Celestial Martial Sword Sect. He was completely different from the other prodigies. Suppress. Lu Ming's eyes were cold. He stepped in the air, and the power of the 9 dragons' sky-stomping steps was unleashed. He took 7 consecutive steps toward Wu Tsang. Bam! 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 Chapter 1109. Bam! Lu Ming's body fell and stepped on Wu Tsang's body once again. Wu Tsang shrieked in pain as his cultivation was completely sealed by Lu Ming. He could not muster any strength at all. The crowd gasped. The disciplinary army commander was too ruthless. He even dared to suppress Wu Tsang. How overbearing! Lu Ming grabbed Wu Tsang and threw him to the side of the other 3 disciples of the Tianwu Sword Sect to lie on the ground. The 3 Sky Martial Sword Sect disciples looked at each other before looking at Wu Tsang with an interesting expression. Initially, they had been suppressed by Lu Ming and were lying on the ground like dogs eating feces. They felt extremely humiliated. However, at the sight of Wu Tsang lying on the ground, they suddenly felt much better. Even a genius like Wu Tsang was suppressed and forced to lie there. It made sense that they were forced to lie there as well. Ah! Wu Tsang howled like a wild beast. He was furious, especially when he saw the strange looks from the crowd. He wanted to kill himself. Of course, it was just a thought. How could he bear to die? He had a bright future ahead of him. Where are you going? At this moment, Lu Ming looked at a person in the air not far away. That person was Shi Fang. When he saw that even Wu Tsang was suppressed, he almost peed in his pants. Just as he was about to sneak away, Lu Ming saw him. He revealed a smile that was uglier than crying and said, Ming Lu, what are you trying to do? What am I trying to do? As an Imperial Dragon Guard, you actually brought people from the Sky Martial Sword Sect to deal with the disciplinary hall. You colluded with the enemy. What do you think I'm trying to do? Lu Ming sneered. His true energy erupted and he grabbed at Shi Fang. Shi Fang turned pale with fright. He wanted to retreat, but he felt a terrifying force enveloping him. He couldn't move at all. In the next moment, a force pulled him down and he fell heavily to the ground. Ah no! He screamed. Bam! Lu Ming lifted his leg and stepped on Shi Fang's dantian. Shi Fang's entire body arched like a big prawn. He then let out a heart-wrenching scream. My cultivation base! My cultivation base! You've crippled my cultivation base! Shi Fang let out a roar of despair. The spirit embryo in his dantian had been crushed by Lu Ming. Crippling your cultivation is your punishment. Scram! After saying that, he kicked out. Shi Fang was kicked away like a rubber ball. He turned into a black dot and disappeared in the air. It was unknown how far he flew. As for whether he would fall to his death, Lu Ming was too lazy to think about it. All right, the harvest is not bad. What are you guys waiting for? Bring them all back to the law enforcement hall. Lu Ming looked at Tai Xing and the others and said, Bring him back to the law enforcement hall? Tai Xing and the others looked at each other with unsightly expressions. Nonsense. Only by bringing them back will we have the capital to negotiate with them. Do you think that the Celestial Martial Sword faction will let this matter rest just because you let them go? Don't just stand there. Bring them away. With a wave of his hand, Lu Ming grabbed Wu Tsang and flew toward the Hall of Justice. Helpless, Tai Xing and the others could only lead the other 3 disciples of the Heavenly Martial Sword faction to follow Lu Ming. There's going to be a show to watch. This matter will definitely provoke the seniors of the Celestial Martial Sword faction. Let's go and take a look. This commander is indeed impressive. However, with the seniors of the Celestial Martial Sword faction taking action. Let's see how he's going to deal with this. Let's go and take a look. There were tens of thousands of people in the crowd. They followed Lu Ming from afar and headed toward the law enforcement hall. Moreover, the number of people was increasing. Not long after Lu Ming and the others left, Xie Zhen and Shi Zheng rushed over. When they heard that Wu Tsang was suppressed by Lu Ming, both of them were dumbfounded and in disbelief. They were confident that Lu Ming would be beaten half to death by Wu Tsang or even killed on the spot. However, the outcome was the complete opposite of what they expected. Let's go to the law enforcement hall. Xie Zhen brought Shi Zheng and rushed to the law enforcement hall. When Lu Ming brought Wu Tsang and the others back to the law enforcement hall, the remaining members of the law enforcement army were stunned, following which their eyes were filled with fear. Lu Ming had actually suppressed a disciple of the Celestial Martial Sword faction and even Wu Tsang. This was going to break the heavens. If the seniors of the Celestial Martial Sword faction were to go berserk, how would they deal with it? We are the law enforcement army. We enforce the law on behalf of the Saint Emperor. What are you afraid of? Follow my instructions and get to work. Lu Ming shouted. He then gave Taixing and the others some instructions. As for Lu Ming, he threw Wu Tsang and the others on the ground and lined them up in a row. He took out a wooden armchair and sat there, closing his eyes to rest. The onlookers looked at each other. This commander of the law enforcement army was really bold. At this moment, he was sitting leisurely on the armchair with his eyes closed. The sky above the law enforcement hall was filled with people. As time passed, more and more people arrived. This was different from the previous incident against the Huang family. This time, it was against the Celestial Martial Sword faction. Moreover, the suppression of a second-grade genius had caused a huge commotion. Many people were shocked and rushed over to watch. Xie Zhen and Shi Zheng had arrived. There were even second-grade geniuses from other overlords. The crowd saw Jing Kongling, Kong Xian, and Sandalwood Fairy. There were also Sanguinarum, Yin Bupo, and the others. There were at least 7 or 8 of them. These geniuses were shocked when they saw Lu Ming sitting on the armchair with his eyes closed. Wu Tsang was as famous as them. However, this ordinary-looking law enforcement army commander was so powerful that he could suppress Wu Tsang. This shocked them. The royal family of the ancient Saint dynasty indeed has a strong foundation. To think that they would have such a powerful law enforcement army commander. Some of them thought to themselves. Suddenly, a terrifying pressure descended from the sky. The crowd felt as though there was a huge mountain pressing down on them. There was a terrifying roar from the aura. Under the pressure, the crowd opened up a path for 3 old men to step through the air with gloomy faces. The 3 old men were dressed in white robes and carried ancient swords on their backs. There seemed to be endless sword chi roaring around their bodies. Just their aura alone was shocking. They're here. The crowd was shocked. The elders of the Celestial Martial Sword faction were here. At this moment, Lu Ming opened his eyes and looked at the sky. The 3 experts of the Celestial Martial Sword faction stepped through the air and stopped above the law enforcement hall. Bastard! You're finished. You're dead. Haha, you're dead. When Wu Tsang saw the arrival of the 3 old men, he yelled out in joy. Bam! Lu Ming stood up and stepped on Wu Tsang's face, causing his face to fall heavily onto the ground. Wu Tsang took a mouthful of mud and struggled wildly. He was so frustrated that he was about to explode. The crowd was shocked as well. Lu Ming dared to do such a thing in the face of 3 elders of the Celestial Martial Sword faction. He was simply lawless. The gazes of the 3 elders were as sharp as swords, landing on Lu Ming. How dare you! One of the old men bellowed. His eyes were extremely sinister as he scolded. Kid, do you know who you have taken down? Aren't they just a few trash from the Celestial Martial Sword faction? Why, do you think that you're proud of raising a few trash? Lu Ming curled his lips and said casually, Chapter 1110. How presumptuous! How bold! You deserve to die." The three old men of the Tianwu sword sect yelled with cold gazes. Their bodies were engulfed in powerful sword intents. "Haha, you asked for it. That despicable son of a bitch is dead for sure." The eighth prince, Xiejin, let out a hollow laugh. "Kid, you should commit suicide. Everyone in the law enforcement hall should commit suicide as well. Then, I'll forget about this matter. Otherwise, not only you, but your families and the forces behind you will not be able to escape punishment." The old man who spoke first continued to speak. His tone was filled with an air of superiority and indisputability. His gaze swept across Taixing and the others, causing them to feel a chill down their spines. "Ha ha ha!" Lu Ming burst out laughing all of a sudden and stomped his foot on Wu Tsang's face, causing him to cry out in agony. His lips curled upward as he stared coldly at the old men of the Tianwu sword sect and said, "Punish? Let this matter rest? What a joke! What right do you have to punish us? We are the ones who should be punished. The disciples of the Tianwu sword sect have killed someone in the sacred city for no reason. We, the disciplinary army, are enforcing the law on behalf of the sacred emperor. However, the Tianwu sword sect dares to attack the disciplinary hall openly. Are you looking down on the royal family? Are you looking down on the sacred emperor? Do you really think there's no one in the royal family?" The old men of the Tianwu sword sect were enraged after hearing the words. They stared at Wu Tsang, who was still under Lu Ming's foot, with an unpleasant expression. Lu Ming had used the royal family and the sacred emperor to pressure them. Even if they did not care about the royal family and the sacred emperor, they could not say it out loud. After all, the ancient sage dynasty was still the ruler of the world. Furthermore, they were currently in the sacred city, which was the core territory of the ancient sage dynasty. No matter how arrogant the Tianwu sword sect was, they would still be intimidated. "Kid, what will it take for you to let them go?" The old man who had spoken first said coldly as he glanced at Wu Tsang and the others. Wu Tsang was a second-grade genius who had a chance to become a martial emperor. They could not afford to lose him. Thus they decided to save Wu Tsang first. "Let them go? Sure, but since they have committed a crime, they should be punished. How about this? You can pay the ransom. 500,000 primordial stones for the 3 trashes. Wu Tsang? 2 million, or as it is," Lu Ming said indifferently. As soon as these words came out, the whole place exploded. Extortion. This was blatant extortion. To think that this puny commander of the law enforcement army would dare to extort a powerful being of the Sky Martial sword sect. He was truly blinded by greed. The 3 old men from the Sky Martial sword sect were seething with anger as their eyes turned red. Even though they had lived for thousands of years, they had never met such a daring person. To think that he would dare to extort them, the Sky Martial sword sect. "Bastard, I'll kill you." The old man who spoke first was enraged. He couldn't bear it any longer and let out a long roar. A terrifying sword cheek-condensed and slashed towards Lu Ming. 4th-level spirit god. This old man was a 4th-level spirit god expert, and his battle prowess was several times stronger than Wu Tsang. Lu Ming's glabella glowed as a small red pagoda appeared and rapidly expanded. This small pagoda was the Emperor's spirit weapon that Lu Ming had obtained in the Sacred Mansion Mystic Realm. After so many days of refining, Lu Ming had already begun to refine it. The aura of the Emperor's spirit weapon in the small pagoda was also completely restrained. Outsiders could not sense it at all. Lu Ming wanted to take this opportunity to test the power of the small pagoda. After all, there were countless pagoda-shaped spiritual weapons in the world. Lu Ming wasn't afraid of being recognized as long as he withdrew his aura. Lu Ming grabbed the body of the pagoda and smashed it towards the sword light. With a loud boom, the sword light was shattered. Lu Ming's body didn't move at all. The Emperor's spiritual weapon consumes too much true essence. I really can't bring out much of its power. Lu Ming muttered to himself. He had used up a large amount of true essence in the previous attack. Even a martial emperor would be envious of an emperor's spiritual weapon. It was normal that he couldn't bring out its power. As he muttered to himself, he put the small pagoda away. He wasn't satisfied, but the others were already stunned. Lu Ming could actually block the attack of a 4th-level spirit god expert. He was too strong. At this moment, Lu Ming was unfathomable in the eyes of the crowd. Every time others thought that he had reached his limit, the strength he displayed would exceed their imagination. You're just a law enforcer. Your treasure is good, but let's see how many of my moves you can take with just your treasure. The elder from the Sky Martial Sword sect shouted angrily. His aura became even more shocking. A sword light shot up 10,000 meters high, and the sword's power was vast and terrifying. If a tiger doesn't show its might, you'll take me for a sick cat. Kill! Lu Ming shouted. A long spear condensed in his hand, and he pierced it towards a Sky Martial Sword sect disciple. Puff! The Sky Martial Sword sect disciple screamed miserably as he was nailed to the ground by Lu Ming. Lu Ming used a thunderous method to tell them not to think that he didn't dare to kill. Give me the Origin Stone as a ransom. Otherwise, I'll kill all of you. Lu Ming's voice was very cold. Lu Ming wouldn't miss such a good opportunity to extort a sum of money. Purely absorbing the spirit energy of heaven and earth for cultivation was too slow. After such a long time, Lu Ming's current cultivation level was only at the mid-second level of the spirit god realm. If he could devour a large number of primordial stones, his cultivation level would improve rapidly. However, he lacked resources now. There was still half a month before the million-year national sacrificial ceremony began. The competition set by the Sacred Emperor would also begin. Lu Ming's goal was to get into the top 3. The Sacred Emperor could agree to one condition for the top 3. However, it wasn't that easy to get into the top 3. When Yang Patian and Tuobashir were in the Sacred Mansion's secret realm, their cultivation had already reached the peak 2nd level spirit god level. Now that some time had passed, it was very likely that they had made a breakthrough. If a genius like Yang Patian had reached the 3rd level spirit god level, it would be more troublesome for him to defeat him. Moreover, there were 5 such geniuses in the central continent and Nanming. It wouldn't be easy for the geniuses of the Western Desert to get into the top 3. However, if Lu Ming's cultivation also broke through to the 3rd level spirit god level, he would have full confidence. How dare you! Bastard, you're courting death. Kill! Lu Ming's killing of a Sky Martial Sword sect disciple completely enraged the 3 elders of the Sky Martial Sword sect. Terrifying auras erupted, and sword chi soared into the sky. Their killing intent was incomparably cold, as if winter had arrived. Especially the auras of the other 2 elders. They were even more terrifying than the one who attacked before. They definitely surpassed the 4th level, spirit god level. Such experts wanted to join forces, and their momentum was too shocking. The law enforcement flag, please! Lu Ming suddenly shouted. The law enforcement flag is here. Within the law enforcement hall, Tai Xing rushed out with a large flag. Lu Ming took it and stabbed it into the ground. It was a 10-meter-long flag with a sword and a saber embroidered on it. It was incomparably sharp and looked like a real saber and sword. However, the flag looked very old and was even covered in dust. It was obvious that it hadn't been used for a long time. Chapter 1111. It's the law enforcement flag. The law enforcement flag that rules the world. The law enforcement flag that was created by the ancient Saint Emperor. Discussions broke out in the crowd as many of them had serious looks in their eyes. The law enforcement flag was created by the ancient Saint Emperor when he created the law enforcement army. It was used to rule the world. 30,000 years ago, wherever the law enforcement flag passed, everyone would tremble in fear. However, after the war 30,000 years ago, the ancient Saint dynasty was weakened and the law enforcement army was useless. Since then, the law enforcement flag had lost its deterrence. It had been many years since anyone took out the law enforcement flag. However, the moment the law enforcement flag was taken out, everyone's heart skipped a beat. Do you think you can stop us by taking out the law enforcement flag? How naive! You must die today, an old man yelled out as he took a step forward. With every step he took, sword chi would spread out, slicing apart the void one after another. This was an existence that surpassed the fourth level of the spirit god realm. In fact, it was even higher than the fifth level. He was too strong. How dare you? The law enforcement flag is here. We are the law enforcement army. By raising the law enforcement flag, we represent the ancient saint dynasty, the royal family, and the ancient saint emperor. You people from the Sky Martial Sword sect have no respect for the royal family and the ancient saint emperor. Are you people from the Sky Martial Sword sect trying to rebel and destroy the Xie family and replace them? Lu Ming stood straight and pointed his spear at Wu Tsang's back as he shouted. His words swept through the crowd like a storm. The three old men from the Sky Martial Sword sect looked terrible and solemn. Lu Ming's accusation was too big. He directly accused them of wanting to rebel and destroy the Xie family. Although the Sky Martial Sword sect really had such thoughts, how could they say it out loud? Moreover, the Sky Martial Sword sect didn't have the strength to do so now. The Sky Martial Sword sect has wild ambitions. You look down on the royal family and the royal power. Today, the 8th prince is here. Are you going to rebel in front of the 8th prince and look down on the royal power and the Xie family? How can the 8th prince tolerate you? At the end of his words, Lu Ming looked at Xie Zhen. Lu Ming had noticed Xie Zhen a long time ago. Everyone else also turned their gazes to the 8th prince. Xie Zhen's face fell as he cursed Lu Ming 1,000 times in his heart. Lu Ming was using him as a shield. But what could he do in this situation? Lu Ming took out the banner. The banner had been created by the ancient sage emperor. His ancestor had represented the face of the Xie clan. Lu Ming was a member of the law enforcement army, acting on behalf of the sage emperor. If the Celestial Martial Sword sect wanted to make a move against Lu Ming, or even kill Lu Ming, it would be the same as slapping the Xie clan's face. In this sort of situation, Lu Ming had once again dragged him into the water. If Xie Zhen didn't do anything, and word of this reached the ears of the other members of the Xie clan, or even the sage emperor, he would have to bear the consequences. Moreover, there were more than a dozen princes at the moment, and they weren't very harmonious. They were fighting openly and covertly. If he didn't handle it well today and caused the imperial Xie family to lose face, there was no guarantee that the other princes would use this point to attack him. Thinking of this, Xie Zhen gritted his teeth, wishing he could chop Lu Ming into pieces. 8th prince, am I wrong? Lu Ming continued to ask. You're right. In the end, Xie Zhen gritted his teeth and stepped down from the air to stand beside Lu Ming. He faced the 3 elders of the Celestial Martial Sword sect and said unwillingly, The 3 of you, Commander Minglu, is right. This time, the Celestial Martial Sword sect's disciple committed the crime first. The law enforcement army will handle this impartially to protect the imperial clan's face. After saying that, Xie Zhen felt even more disgusted than if he had eaten a dead rat. He felt so sullen, so sullen. What was his goal in transferring Lu Ming to the law enforcement army? Wasn't it to let Lu Ming offend these major powers and then be slapped to death by them? But now, he had achieved the early results. But the later results were completely different from what he had expected. Not only was Lu Ming not slapped to death, in the end, he had to step in personally to protect Lu Ming. What kind of situation was this? He felt so sullen. He hated Lu Ming so much that he almost broke his teeth. The 8th prince is right, as expected of the imperial clan's outstanding talent. You, 3 old men, if you want to kill me today, you'll have to step over the 8th prince's dead body first. Come on, if you have the ability, come on. Lu Ming shouted. Xie Zhen almost spat out a mouthful of blood. What did he mean by stepping over the 8th prince's dead body to kill him? Xie was so angry that he almost vomited blood. However, he couldn't back down now. He could only glare at the 3 elders of the celestial martial sword sect while gnashing his teeth. In the eyes of others, Xie had a strong sense of righteousness and wasn't afraid in the face of danger. However, they didn't know that it was because he was angered by Lu Ming. The 3 elders of the celestial martial sword sect had ugly expressions. The 8th prince, Xie wasn't Lu Ming. If they killed him, then so be it. Xie was the son of the sage emperor, and they were in the holy city. If they dared to kill Xie in front of everyone, they would definitely incur the wrath of the imperial clan Xie family. They wouldn't be able to leave the holy city. Among the crowd, there were many members of the law enforcement army who came from the other law enforcement halls to watch the show. They felt their blood boiling, and their hearts were filled with joy. All these years, the members of the law enforcement army had been too cowardly and sullen. Their lives were worse than dogs. When the people from the major factions committed crimes, they had to take out origin stones and treasures to ask the other party to apologize. How were they going to live their lives? Now that they saw this scene, they felt a sense of exaltation. It felt too good. Law Enforcement Army, Law Enforcement Flag, the current Sage Emperor is enforcing the law. A burly man shouted and stepped out. A large flag suddenly appeared in his hand. Law Enforcement Flag. At this moment, another law enforcer from the law enforcement hall stood beside Lu Ming, holding the law enforcement flag in his hand and inserting it beside Lu Ming's law enforcement flag. Law Enforcement Army. Enforce the law on behalf of the Sage Emperor. Another group of people shouted and rushed out, standing behind the burly man. All of them were from another law enforcement hall. There were more than 100 of them. Haha, that's right. Law Enforcement Army. Enforce the law on behalf of the current Sage Emperor. Another person laughed and rushed out. Another law enforcement flag appeared and was placed in a row with the first 2. Haha, I'm here too. Enforce the law on behalf of the current Sage Emperor. With loud roars, law enforcement army members appeared one after another. Law enforcement flags appeared and were placed in a row. In the end, a total of 9 law enforcement flags were placed in a row, fluttering in the wind. Law enforcement hall members from all over the holy city had arrived. They took out their law enforcement flags and were ready to fight alongside Lu Ming and the rest. Nearly 1,000 people stood behind Lu Ming and Xie, glaring angrily at the 3 old men from the Sky Martial Sword sect. Usually, they would swallow their anger and suffer in silence, but today they were ready to go all out. The surrounding crowd looked at the scene in shock. 9 law enforcement flags were out. How many years had it been since something like this happened? Today it happened again because of Lu Ming. Now, what would the Sky Martial Sword sect do? Damn it! Xie roared in his heart, but in this situation he could only hold on. Chapter 11:12. They could neither advance nor retreat. If they advanced, they would offend the ancient Saint dynasty. If they retreated, they would lose all their dignity. They looked coldly at Lu Ming, their eyes filled with murderous intent. They could not wait to tear Lu Ming into pieces. It was all because of Lu Ming that such a situation had occurred. Just as the 2 sides were in a standoff, a ray of golden light appeared from afar and shot towards them. It was so fast that many people could not react to it. Before they could react, the ray of golden light had already appeared in front of them. A dignified, middle-aged man appeared in the air with his hands behind his back. He was wearing a golden dragon robe, a golden crown, and a pair of golden boots. He exuded a majestic aura that made it difficult for everyone to breathe. It was as if they were facing a human king who was inspecting the world. "Royal uncle!" Xie exclaimed when he saw the middle-aged man. Everyone was shocked. If Xie called him royal uncle, he must be the younger brother of the current sacred emperor. An important figure from the imperial Xie family had appeared. As expected, it has appeared. Lu Ming's lips curled into a smile. Today's matter had blown up. Lu Ming was certain that the Xie family of the royal family would definitely send someone to protect the dignity of the royal family. After all, although the ancient Saint dynasty was weak, it was still the strongest force in the central continent. Xie Zhan's royal uncle looked at Xie Zhan and nodded. "You are not bad." He then looked at the 3 elders of the celestial martial sword faction and said, "There are rules in the holy city. You are not allowed to kill innocent people in the holy city. If you have a grudge, you can fight on the battle stage. No one cares about your life or death. However, killing innocent people in the holy city is an act of disrespect to the ancient Saint dynasty. The law enforcement army should enforce the law. You are guilty." Xie Zhan's royal uncle's voice echoed throughout the area. Everyone was shocked. Then they realized what was going on. The ancient Saint dynasty was nearing the end of 1,000,000 years, and things had gotten out of hand. The imperial Xie clan had to protect the dignity of the imperial clan. If they were to compromise in front of the Sky Martial Sword sect, the imperial clan would lose even more of their dignity in the future. If today's matter hadn't been blown out of proportion and the celestial martial sword sect's expert had slapped Lu Ming to death, everything would have been over. But now that things had gotten out of hand, the imperial Xie clan had no choice but to support the law enforcement army. The 3 elders of the Sky Martial Sword sect had ugly expressions on their faces. They were well aware of this fact. "Then what do we have to do to let him go?" The 3 elders of the Celestial Martial Sword sect exchanged glances. One of them spoke up, clearly admitting defeat. "The law enforcement army naturally has its own rules. You can discuss with the commander of the law enforcement army about what to do." The middle-aged uncle said, "I've already stated my conditions. Just do as I said. If you're guilty, you should be punished." Lu Ming squinted his eyes and chuckled. The 3 elders of the Sky Martial Sword sect had gloomy expressions. After pondering for a while, one of the elders took out a storage ring and waved it a few times before tossing it over to Lu Ming. Lu Ming caught it and scanned it with his spiritual consciousness. His face darkened as he said, "Why are there less than 500,000? Don't you want this guy anymore?" Lu Ming pointed at the disciple of the Sky Martial Sword sect that he had killed. "You've already killed him. Do you still want to keep him?" One of the elders of the Sky Martial Sword sect asked, "A corpse is still a person. If you don't want his corpse, I'll throw it out to feed the dogs." Lu Ming said indifferently, "You," the elder of the Sky Martial Sword sect, was filled with killing intent. However, Lu Ming looked at him indifferently without any fear. In the end, the Sky Martial Sword sect had no choice but to give in. For the sake of their reputation, they could only take out another 500,000 origin stones. "Trash! Take them away!" Lu Ming waved his hand, and Wu Tsang and the other 3 disciples of the Sky Martial Sword sect flew into the sky. An elder waved his hand and caught them. He stared coldly at Lu Ming and said, "You are good. Very good. I hope you can stay in the sacred city and enforce our army forever." After saying that, he snorted and turned into 3 sword lights, disappearing from the place. Huff! Huff! The crowd of onlookers let out a long sigh of relief. Their eyes were still filled with disbelief. This matter had actually ended just like that. The elder of the Sky Martial Sword sect had charged in aggressively, but in the end he left behind a few million origin stones and left with his tail between his legs. Before this, no one had expected such an outcome. Everyone's gaze landed on Lu Ming, this awesome commander. Before this, no one would pay attention to a mere commander of the Enforcer Army. However, he had attracted everyone's attention now. First, he suppressed Wu Tsang with his powerful combat strength. Then he blocked the attack of a level 4 spirit god expert. Although Lu Ming used a treasure, it still proved his powerful combat strength. However, what was more important was his courage and wisdom. He dared to face the elder of the Sky Martial Sword sect alone and was good at borrowing the power of the Imperial Xie family. He even borrowed the power of the ancient Saint Emperor, who created the Enforcer Army to force the elder of the Sky Martial Sword sect to retreat with his tail between his legs. It was hard to believe that all of this was done by this bearded man. With such means, if this person was 10 years younger, he would be able to compete with all the heroes in the world. Jenna, let's go. In the sky, the middle-aged imperial uncle glanced at Xie Zhen before looking at Lu Ming. What's your name? The middle-aged imperial uncle asked. Ming Lu. Lu Ming replied in a tone that was neither humble nor overbearing. Ming Lu? Good. You are very good. The middle-aged imperial uncle said a few words before waving his hand and leaving. He has ill intentions towards me. Lu Ming looked at the sky and pondered. Lu Ming didn't feel any kindness from the middle-aged imperial uncle. Instead, he felt ill intentions. After pondering for a while, Lu Ming revealed a cold smile on his face. He could roughly guess why the middle-aged imperial uncle had ill intentions towards him. Now, the ancient Saint dynasty wanted to form an alliance with some overlord forces to increase their strength. However, although Lu Ming seemed to have defended the dignity of the imperial family, he had also offended the Sky Martial Sword sect. Moreover, he had forced the imperial family to offend the Sky Martial Sword sect. It would be harder for the imperial family to form a good relationship with the Sky Martial Sword sect in the future. The middle-aged imperial uncle naturally didn't have a good impression of Lu Ming. In his heart, he probably wanted to slap Lu Ming to death for being a busybody. Lu Ming smiled faintly. He didn't mind. After all, he had infiltrated the Imperial Dragon Guards and then the Enforcers because he wanted to use this identity to investigate Xian Yinqing's whereabouts. When he found Xian Yinqing in the future, he would just leave. Who would be able to find him? Mighty. The commander is mighty. At this moment, the Enforcers were the most excited. They were so excited that they were trembling. It was as if they had eaten a chilled watermelon during the hottest days of the year. They had been sullen all this time. However, today they could finally hold their heads high. Even an overlord force like the Sky Martial Sword sect had admitted defeat before the Enforcers, paid a large amount of origin stones, and left with their tails between their legs. This kind of satisfaction was brought about by a sudden outburst after a long period of sullenness. It was better than anything else. Chapter 11:13. Commander is invincible. Commander is mighty. Commander Ming is mighty. At first, it was Taixing and the others who were shouting. Later on, the other enforcers from the disciplinary hall also shouted. Lu Ming raised his hands, and the crowd quietened down. Brothers of the enforcers, I'm grateful for your help this time. Lu Ming cupped his fists and said, the 9 enforcers' flags were also a form of deterrence. Commander Ming, you're too courteous. It's because of you that our enforcers can hold our heads high and let out the frustration in our hearts. We should be the ones thanking you. That's right. We should be thanking you. The others spoke one after another. Everyone, you're too courteous. Since you're all here today, I'll treat everyone today. Let's have a good time. Taixing, bring some of your brothers and buy some food. Lu Ming took out some origin stones and handed them to Taixing. All right. Taixing took the origin stones and brought a few of his men out in a hurry. At the same time, the crowd in the sky also dispersed one by one. Soon, everyone had left. However, the news of what had happened that day spread like wildfire. This time it was different from the incident with the Huang family. The previous incident with the Huang family only attracted the attention of a small number of people and became the topic of gossip. This time, it was against the overlord force, the Sky Martial Sword sect. Naturally, it caused a stir. As for the awesome Commander Ming Lu, his reputation soared. Some people even called him the most awesome Enforcers commander in the past 30,000 years. Soon, Taixing bought a large amount of food and wine. In the disciplinary hall, a banquet was held. There were more than 1,000 enforcers drinking and chatting in the disciplinary hall. It was late at night before they dispersed. Taixing, here are 500,000 origin stones. Take them and share them with your brothers. After the other enforcers left, Lu Ming took out a storage ring and handed it to Taixing. Commander, this won't do. You risked your life to get these. We didn't contribute anything. Tai Xing waved his hands. The others shook their heads. Although they were poor, they still had their principles. Take it. If it weren't for you guys supporting me from behind, why would the Celestial Martial Sword faction be afraid of us? Take it and divide it. Lu Ming handed the storage ring to Tai Xing, then returned to his room alone. After closing the door, Lu Ming entered the mountain river diagram. With a wave of his hand, a huge pile of ores appeared before him, a total of 3 million. It's time to break through to the third level of the spirit god realm. With a thought, Zhang Xian summoned the bloodline of the 9 dragons. Opening his mouth, he swallowed 100,000 ores and began assimilating them. As the primordial stone continued to be refined, Lu Ming's cultivation level increased rapidly. From the late 2nd level of the spirit god realm to the peak 2nd level of the spirit god realm, he started to break through to the 3rd level of the spirit god realm. 3 days passed in a flash. After Xiao Chen refined 3 million primal stones, the quintessence in Lu Ming's body surged endlessly. It was like countless true dragons roaring in Lu Ming's body. After a while, it slowly calmed down. I've finally reached the 3rd level of the spirit god realm. However, I've used up all 3 million origin stones. Lu Ming opened his eyes. There was a trace of excitement in his eyes. The consumption was huge, but the gains were huge as well. In a short 3 days, Lu Ming's cultivation advanced from the middle stage of the 2nd level of the spirit god realm to the early stage of the 3rd level of the spirit god realm. Lu Ming's combat prowess soared once again. Lu Ming was very confident about the competition that would take place in more than 10 days. Almost 2 years have passed since Martial Monarch D.E. sealed the Talisman Puppet Sect. The Talisman Puppet Sect can only last for 5 years. There's still a little more than 3 years left. At that time, will I be able to deal with D.E.? Lu Ming could not help but think of the Talisman Puppet Sect. When he thought of this, he felt a lot of pressure. It was too difficult to reach the level where he could deal with D.E. in the remaining 3 years. Based on Lu Ming's current progress, it was almost impossible. Lu Ming shook his head. There was no point in thinking too much. He could only push forward and do his best. Lu Ming stretched his back. His bones vibrated and crackling sounds came from his body. He stood up and walked out. In the following days, Lu Ming regained his calm. Apart from cultivating every day, he would walk around the holy city. Ever since the incident at the Tianwu Sword Sect, the disciples of the various overlords became much more well-behaved in the holy city, especially in the area under Lu Ming's jurisdiction. They did not dare to attack others for no reason. Even if there was a grudge, they would fight it out on the platform. Lu Ming's days were leisurely and carefree. Soon, 10 days passed. The day of the ancient Saint Dynasty's million-year national sacrificial ceremony was approaching. During this period, the holy city was unusually lively. Lu Ming could see experts from various places as he walked on the streets. The Northern Plains martial artists were all tall and sturdy. Even the women were mostly tall. The weapons they used were either spiked maces, giant hammers, or giant axes. They were all heavy weapons, and their auras were wild. They rode on all sorts of mounts, making them easy to recognize. There were also some martial artists who had a gloomy aura. They were either filled with ghost chi or blood chi. Everyone who passed by them gave off a cold feeling. They were all martial artists from the southern underworld. There were also some monks with bright heads wearing kasayas. Naturally, they were holy monks from the western desert. On the other hand, Lu Ming did not see many people from the eastern wilderness. On this day, the ancient Saint Dynasty's million-year national sacrificial ceremony finally began. Buzz. There was a buzzing sound in the sky. There was a strong fluctuation. Lu Ming, Tai Xing, and the others walked out of the law enforcement hall and flew into the sky to watch. They saw that the sky above the holy city was filled with colorful clouds and heavenly music. The space was constantly distorted in the light. Rumble. Finally, a huge platform appeared in the sky. The platform was neither made of gold nor jade. It was filled with colorful lights. There were dragons and phoenixes flying in the sky. There was also a Qilin walking around. Of course, it was not real. It was formed by a formation. Then tables and chairs appeared on the east and west sides of the platform. The tables and chairs were made of fine jade. There were dragons and phoenixes carved on them. They were extremely luxurious. There were many of them. At a glance, there were more than 10,000 of them. All of them were suspended in the air above the holy city. When the tables and chairs appeared on the east and west sides, a jade staircase appeared in the north. There were 99 steps. At the end of the staircase, a huge ancient altar appeared. The altar was ancient and heavy, as if it had gone through the vicissitudes of time. It was 10,000 meters tall and disappeared into the clouds. The Holy Emperor has arrived. Suddenly, a voice came out from the palace. The voice rolled and spread throughout the entire holy city in an instant. In the palace, heavenly music sounded. Holy light filled the air and shot up into the sky. Then, a group of people stepped into the air. The person at the front was wearing a golden robe embroidered with a picture of the human king patrolling the world. He looked to be in his 50s. He was tall and sturdy. His body was filled with holy light. There were stars shining in his eyes. He was filled with endless majesty. Chapter 11:14. Beside Xie Qitian, there were 2 old men with white hair. They looked ordinary, but they exuded a terrifying aura. Lu Ming had seen this aura more than once. The aura of an emperor. The 2 elders beside Xie Qitian were also sovereigns. In this way, including Xie Qitian, the imperial Xie family had 3 sovereigns at once, which was really terrifying. That was just on the surface. Lu Ming did not believe that there were no emperors in the imperial family. There was a rumor that the previous emperor of the ancient Saint dynasty might still be alive. The ancient Saint dynasty was indeed an ancient force that had been passed down for millions of years. Even though it had weakened, it had a strong foundation and was not something that an ordinary overlord force could compare with. Behind Xie Qitian and the 2 old men, there were more than 10 men and women. All of them had the looks of dragons and phoenixes. The older ones were middle-aged, while the youngest ones looked like they were in their 20s. There were a total of 15 people, and they were the children of the current emperor. They were the princes and princesses of the ancient Saint dynasty. Xie Ninjuan. Lu Ming's heart trembled. In the crowd, he saw a woman who looked extremely similar to Xie Ninqing. However, compared to Xie Ninqing, she was even colder and more holy. She was like an inviolable goddess who stood high above the masses, looking down on them. Besides Xie Ninjuan, there was another lady who was in her 20s. She was in her prime, and she was extremely beautiful. Although the lady did not look like Xie Ninjuan and Xie Ninqing, she was still a rare beauty. Lu Ming's heart skipped a beat. That lady must be the other princess, Xie Nianlin. However, he did not see Xie Ninqing. They did not even let Shao Qing appear on such an important day. They really don't treat Shao Qing as their own child. Lu Ming clenched his fists. He also saw Xie Zhen and the 10th prince, Xie Yan. Lu Ming had never seen the other princes before. Behind the princes and princesses, there were some concubines, nobles, ministers, and some experts of the ancient Saint dynasty. There were more than 1,000 people who stepped out and landed on the platform in the air. The arrival of the sage emperor. Please take your seats. It was that same voice again. It spread through the entire holy city. The person who transmitted the voice was definitely a Zun cultivator. As soon as he finished speaking, a loud laugh rang out. Haha, is Yinyang Palace the first to arrive? A burly, white-haired old man wearing a long robe with the pattern of the Yinyang fish on it arrived in the air with a group of people. This old man's aura was terrifying and shocking, suppressing the heaven and earth. An emperor, this was another emperor. The Yinyang emperor of the Yinyang Palace and his disciples have arrived. That voice resounded throughout the holy city. I wonder how many big shots will come today. Beside Lu Ming, Tai Xing and the others were already so excited that their eyes were shining. The Yinyang Palace was also an overlord force in the central continent. It was extremely powerful and was no weaker than the Sky Martial Sword Sect. Brother Yinyang, please have a seat. Xie Qitian raised his hand. Thank you, brother. The Yinyang Divine Emperor cupped his fists and led the experts of the Yinyang Palace to a nearby table. The Demon Emperor of Mount Tianyao has arrived. Immediately, another big force arrived. It was the overlord force of the central continent. Mount Tianyao was very similar to the myriad demon valley in the eastern wilderness. They were both gathering places for demonic beasts and were led by a demon emperor. Yu Xian Martial Emperor of Mount Shinkong and his disciples have arrived. Cold Blood Hall, Heavenly Sun Palace. Next, many overlords of the central continent arrived one after another. Moreover, each overlord force was led by an emperor. Soon, more than a dozen emperors appeared on both sides of the platform in the sky. In the holy city, countless people's eyes lit up as they looked at this scene in shock. More than a dozen emperors gathered together. This lineup was too shocking and terrifying. It was so rare that it would not happen even once in many years. Perhaps many emperors had gathered in the ancient city of fate in the last battle of fate, but that was in the ancient city of fate. Ordinary people could not see it at all. But now, more than a dozen emperors were in full view of the public. As for the supremes, there were even more, but they were completely overshadowed by the emperors. More than a dozen emperors. What kind of power was this? If they joined forces, they could really destroy the world. Baijian Martial Emperor of the Heaven-Guarding Divine Army has arrived. Suddenly, a voice was heard, and the crowd fell silent. Everyone turned to look in the same direction. There, a middle-aged man in black armor walked over. Behind him, a group of people followed. Everyone was wearing armor, and their auras were wild and their fighting spirit was soaring. Everyone was filled with an extremely strong fighting spirit, as if they were ready for a big battle at any time. Hiss! The Heaven-Guarding Divine Army is here! Someone sucked in a breath of air and whispered among themselves. In the central continent, if there was a force that was not weaker than the ancient Saint Dynasty, it would be the Heaven-Guarding Divine Army. If there was a force that hated the ancient Saint Dynasty the most, it would be the Heaven-Guarding Divine Army. The Heaven-Guarding Divine Army was originally the strongest army of the ancient Saint Dynasty. There were many experts in it, and they were invincible. Back then, they had helped the ancient Saint Dynasty suppress the world, and everyone feared them. They were known as the Heaven-Guarding Divine Army. However, in the war 30,000 years ago, the Heaven-Guarding Divine Army chose to watch from the sidelines. In the end, the Heaven-Guarding Divine Army caused the imperial Xie family to suffer heavy losses. The Heaven-Guarding Divine Army then announced that they would leave the Xie family and dominate the world. Some people said that if the Heaven-Guarding Divine Army had participated in that war, the imperial Xie family would not have suffered such heavy losses. They would not have been unable to control the world, and the current situation in the central continent would not have happened. Therefore, the imperial Xie family viewed the Heaven-Guarding Divine Army as a traitor and an enemy. In the past 30,000 years, the two sides had fought many terrifying battles. However, the two sides were on par with each other in terms of strength. They had suffered losses, and neither side could do anything to the other. Yang Patian, one of the 5 great youths, was from the Heaven-Guarding Divine Army. Originally, some people thought that the Heaven-Guarding Divine Army would not come today. However, they did not expect the Heaven-Guarding Divine Army to be here. Moreover, the Heaven-Guarding Divine Army was leading the team. Xie Qitian's eyes shone brightly as he stared at the Heaven-Guarding Divine Army. He said, "Today everyone is a guest. Please take a seat." "You're welcome," the Heaven-Guarding Divine Army said casually as he led the team to a seat at the side. The 3rd Underworld Emperor of the South has arrived. The Western Desert's Wu Mie Buddha Emperor has arrived. The Northern Plains experts have arrived. The supremes of the Eastern Wilderness, Heavenly Deity Palace, Heavenly Corpse Sect, and Sky Monster Valley have arrived. Following that, announcements were made one after another. In the south, an underworld emperor of the south had arrived. Ghostly chi filled the sky as he led a group of experts. In the west, an old monk had a benevolent smile on his face. He wore a simple kasaya and his body was covered in golden light. There was a Buddhist halo above his head. This was a Buddha, also known as the Buddha Emperor. He was an emperor. As for the northern plains and eastern wilderness, no emperors had arrived. That was because the northern plains and eastern wilderness were the same. There were several major forces entrenched in the northern plains, and they were at odds with each other. The emperors could not leave, otherwise their enemies might take advantage of the situation. The Wang family's patriarch, Wang Xingtian, and the Jiang family's patriarch. Chapter 1115. There were two leaders from Emperor Heaven Divine Palace, the Wang family head and the Jiang family head. As for Sky Corpse Sect and Sky Monster Valley, they each had two supreme martial artists leading them. After everyone had taken their seats, some smaller forces, such as Medicine King Valley, who did not have any sovereigns, came and took their seats on both sides. Of course, those who were able to take their seats were all reputable forces. At the very least, they had a supreme martial artist. Those smaller forces were not qualified to take their seats. After half an hour, everyone had arrived. Let the ceremony begin. As the voice sounded, the huge altar started to shine. Endless light bloomed, and the entire holy city was shrouded in the light. Xie Qitian stepped out and climbed up the 99 stone steps to the bottom of the altar. The imperial family, Xie family, and the ministers all looked solemn as they faced the altar. All the experts from the powerful forces in Divine Region also stood up. The first ceremony is for the first sacred emperor since ancient times, Xie Qitian said as he bowed to the altar. Ceremony was not for the heavens, but for the ancestors. Martial artists were supposed to go against the heavens. Naturally, they would not offer a ceremony to the heavens. For the first sacred emperor since ancient times, the imperial family and the ministers followed Xie Qitian and bowed. As for the people from the other forces, they just looked and did not bow. If it had been 30,000 years ago, everyone would have bowed. But now, all the major forces had lost their respect. It was good enough that they could come. Naturally, no one would bow with the imperial family. Just as Xie Qitian and the rest were bowing, a beam of light shot up to the sky from the altar. Then a statue appeared. This statue was the first sacred emperor of the ancient Saint dynasty 1,000,000 years ago. He was also the one who had founded the ancient Saint dynasty. Then Xie Qitian bowed again to offer a ceremony to the second sacred emperor. Similarly, another statue appeared. It was the statue of the second sacred emperor of the ancient Saint dynasty. Then the ceremony continued. On the altar, statues of the past sacred emperors of the ancient Saint dynasty appeared one after another. On the altar, there was a terrifying aura. It was as though the past sacred emperors had been revived. In the end, there were a total of 108 statues on the altar. They represented the 108 sacred emperors who had passed away. The ancient Saint dynasty had been around for 1,000,000 years, and there had been more than 100 sacred emperors. There's no statue of the previous sage emperor. Could it be that the previous sage emperor is still alive? Someone noticed something fishy. Indeed, there was no statue of the previous holy emperor. If the previous holy emperor had already passed away, his statue would definitely appear here. However, it didn't appear now, which meant that the previous holy emperor was still alive. Many sovereigns of the overlord forces had solemn looks in their eyes. Although the imperial Xie family had weakened and could not be compared to 30,000 years ago, they were still not to be underestimated. He, that old fellow, is indeed still around. The 100 battles, martial emperor of the Heaven Suppression Army sneered. The sacrificial ceremony is over. Bestow wine and pills. Xie Qitian's voice was heard. He then waved his hand and the space split open. The huge altar entered the space crack and disappeared. Then tables and chairs appeared where the altar used to be. The members of the Xie family, as well as the nobles and ministers, sat down at the tables and chairs. "Bestow wine and pills." A voice resounded throughout the entire area. Heavenly music was heard again. At the same time, large cauldrons appeared in the palace. These large cauldrons were as big as mountains. Under the large cauldrons, there were burly men who were naked. Each of the burly men carried a large cauldron and walked in the void. Bam! Bam! These large cauldrons seemed to be extremely heavy. Every time the burly men took a step, the space would vibrate and ripple in the void. At a glance, there were a total of 108 burly men carrying 108 cauldrons that were as big as mountains. They walked in the void and appeared in the sky above the holy city. After the 108 burly men, another 108 young women appeared. They were all dressed in light muslin, and their curves were graceful. Every single one of them was a peerlessly beautiful woman. Each of the 108 beautiful women held a purple golden gourd in their hands. "Bestow spiritual wine and spiritual pills. Hurry up and grab more." Tai Xing and the others' eyes lit up as they stared at the sky. "Pour!" A voice was heard. "Ha!" The burly men shouted as they turned the large cauldrons and poured the wine down. Immediately, the spiritual wine in the large cauldrons poured out. Each cauldron was as big as a mountain, and it was unknown how many kilograms of spiritual wine it contained. At this moment, 108 large cauldrons fell at the same time, as if 108 waterfalls were falling from the sky. It was extremely spectacular. Moreover, these were all spiritual wines, not ordinary wines. They were made from spiritual herbs and were very useful for the cultivation of martial artists. Whoosh! The spiritual wine fell from the sky, and the rich wine fragrance filled the entire holy city. It was intoxicating to smell it. Haha, mine. Me too. In the holy city, countless martial artists rushed into the sky and used their methods to draw the spiritual wine to their side. During this process, they could use various methods to obtain the spiritual wine. However, they were not allowed to attack or kill others. Otherwise, they would be killed without mercy. That was the rule. No one attacked or killed others. They only used their own methods to obtain the spiritual wine. Whoosh! Lu Ming opened his mouth and sucked. There seemed to be a vortex in his mouth. The spiritual wine in the sky gathered into a bundle and was swallowed into his mouth. When the wine entered his mouth, it immediately turned into a warm current that flowed throughout his body. It was very comfortable. The medicinal power of this spiritual wine is not of much use to me. Lu Ming smiled and stopped trying to snatch it. Although the spiritual wine was not of much use to spirit god martial artists, it was definitely of great use to those below the spirit god realm. The lower the cultivation, the greater the effect. Those at the sea of soul realm and king realm could definitely increase their cultivation and condense their true yuan. 108 cauldrons that were as big as mountains filled the sky. It was unknown how many kilograms of spiritual wine they contained. The entire holy city was raining spiritual wine. However, not a single drop fell to the ground. They were all pulled by true yuan and collected. Soon, there was not a single drop left in the sky. "Bestow pills." Then the voice sounded again. 108 beautiful women pulled out the lids of the gourds in their hands and poured them down. Immediately, pills were poured out of the gourds and scattered all over the holy city. Those gourds might not look big, but the space inside was like a storage ring. It was unknown how many pills were stored in them, and they continuously scattered on the ground. Countless people's eyes lit up as they used all their strength to collect the pills. Lu Ming waved his hand, and a dozen pills were immediately caught in his hand. Lu Ming glanced at them and found that these pills were not of much use to him. However, they were quite useful to those below the spirit god realm. Among them, there were all kinds of pills. There were healing pills, recovering true yuan, detoxifying pills, increasing cultivation, and so on. Chapter 11:16. What extravagant spending! Lu Ming exclaimed. Although the spirit wine and pills were not of a high level, there were too many of them. With such a terrifying amount added together, the value was enormous. The Xia family of the imperial family had put in a lot of effort for this sacrificial ceremony. Obviously, the imperial family had been preparing for a long time. Otherwise, they would not have taken out such a large amount of spirit wine and pills. In the air, the people from the major factions watched with faint smiles. Not long after, the pills in the gourds were emptied. The burly men and women carried the cauldron and the gourds and flew back to the imperial palace. Then young girls flew out of the imperial palace with all kinds of delicacies and wine, placing them in front of the people from the major factions in the air. Ha ha ha! Today is the million-year anniversary of the sacred dynasty's establishment. Thank you all for coming here and spending this day with me. Come, let me offer you a toast. Xia Qitian raised his wine cup and drank with the major factions. Then Xia Qitian continued, I believe everyone has heard that I intend to choose a young talent as my husband for my daughter, Nianlin. Today, all the talents from all the factions in the Divine Region and the 5 major dominions are here. We will have a competition. Regardless of gender, everyone can participate. The person who wins first place will be Nianlin's husband. Of course, if a woman wins first place, her husband will be pushed back by 1 rank. At the same time, I promise that I will agree to 1 condition of the 2nd and 3rd place. As long as it is within my power, I will allow you to enter the sacred Emperor Ancient Palace to cultivate. The 4th to 10th place can also enter the sacred Emperor Ancient Palace. It's here. When Xia Qitian said that, many people's eyes lit up. It was finally time for the most anticipated segment of the day. Xia Qitian's conditions were too tempting. Not many people could resist. Today, all the geniuses of the Divine Region were gathered. There would definitely be an exciting battle. Back then, the War of Providence had taken place in the ancient city of Providence. Not many people had seen it, and not many knew how exciting it was. But today they could see it. Moreover, it wasn't just the Middle Continent's heavens prides today. The South Underworld, West Desert, North Plains, and East Barren Territories heavens prides had all gathered. Most importantly, numerous top geniuses had stepped into the domain enlightened spirit god realm in succession, and they were about to carry out the strongest battles in the domain enlightened spirit god realm. This was undoubtedly something that everyone looked forward to even more. Many young heaven's favorites in particular were rubbing their fists and rubbing their palms, ready to show off their skills. Brother Xia, how should we compete? The Yinyang Emperor of Yinyang Palace asked. There are too many geniuses here today. It's impossible to compete with them one by one. Firstly, you have to be below the age of 30. Then, you have to go through a round of selection. Only those who pass the selection can enter the official competition, Xia Qitian said. Then he waved his hand, and from the south of the platform, paths condensed by rainbow-colored lights appeared. There were a total of 18 paths, spreading out in the shape of a fan that was 100 miles long. There were tables and chairs on both the east and west sides of the platform, and they were all filled with people. Only the south side was empty. Xia Qitian must have had a plan. The selection process is very simple. Everyone has to go through this path. Those who pass will be considered to have passed, Xia Qitian said. Those who pass through this path will be considered to have passed? Many people's hearts trembled as they looked at the 18 paths with a slightly solemn expression. Since it was a selection process, it was definitely not that simple. There would definitely be obstacles on the path. Those who want to participate, enter through that door. Xia Qitian waved his hand, and a huge door appeared at the end of the 18 paths. On the side of the imperial family, experts flew towards the door and stood guard on both sides of the door. Only those who passed through the door could participate in the selection process. Let's go. I'm going. Immediately, Many young figures flew out from the great forces. There were also young figures flying out from the holy city, flying towards the door. I'm going. Lu Ming smiled at Tai Xing and the others. You're going too? Commander, the sacred emperor said that only those below the age of 30 can participate. How old are you? Tai Xing and the others looked at Lu Ming suspiciously. Lu Ming had a full beard now, no matter how one looked at him. He didn't look like he was below the age of 30. He was at least close to 40 years old. Moreover, martial artists aged very slowly. Lu Ming's actual age might be a few hundred years old. Lu Ming actually wanted to participate. If he was caught trying to make up the numbers, he would have to bear the consequences. Hey, what's with your expressions? I'm not even 30 years old, all right? Lu Ming looked at Tai Xing and the others in disdain before striding towards the door. Not even 30 years old. Tai Xing and the rest of the enforcers stared with their eyes wide open. Their jaws were almost dislocated. It was simply unbelievable. Lu Ming swaggered to the door. At this moment, there was already a long queue at the door. Lu Ming lined up at the back. Who is that? That bearded man. Why is he lining up at such an old age? Isn't that the awesome commander? What is he doing? Didn't he hear the sacred emperor say that only those below the age of 30 can participate? This weird commander is really audacious. Watch carefully. He will definitely be chased away later. Some people noticed Lu Ming and started to discuss among themselves. Lu Ming couldn't be bothered with the surrounding gazes and lined up leisurely. Soon it was Lu Ming's turn. Hold it. What are you doing here? Leave quickly. A burly man guarding the door stopped Lu Ming. What am I doing? I'm here to participate in the competition. Lu Ming glared. Competition? The sacred emperor has ordered that those above the age of 30 are not allowed to participate. How old are you? How dare you ignore the sacred emperor's order? You're courting death. The burly man bellowed with an imposing manner. This weird commander is finished. He dares to ignore the sacred emperor's order. The commotion here naturally attracted the attention of everyone present. Nonsense. Which eye of yours saw that I'm over 30? Let me tell you, I'm not 30 yet. I'm just a little older. Don't judge a book by its cover, Lu Ming said casually. This made many people stunned and then burst into laughter. Lu Ming didn't look like he was under 30. He was definitely over 30. This guy was clearly trying to sneak in. Many people thought so. You, get out of the way. Don't block the way. A cold shout came from behind Lu Ming. It was a woman's voice. It sounded very pleasant but very cold and arrogant. Lu Ming turned his head and saw a beautiful woman. She was tall and beautiful. She was not inferior to Sandalwood Fairy, Jing Kongling, and the others. That's Lu Yusin, one of the 5 great beauties of Zhongzhou State. Some people discussed and looked at Lu Yusin excitedly. So it's Lu Yusin, one of the 5 great beauties of Zhongzhou State. Lu Ming's heart skipped a beat, and he couldn't help but take a few more glances.